Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the Ultra Sage Instinct, Dragon God Naruto x Vados x Ghislaine Dedoldia. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Dimensional Convergence. The air crackled with unnatural electricity as Naruto stood atop the Hokage monument, his white sage cloak billowing in the wind that shouldn't exist on such a still night. Something fundamental had shifted in the world. He could feel it in his bones, in the very chakra that flowed through his veins. The moon above hung fractured, as though someone had taken a kunai to reality itself, leaving a jagged tear in the night sky through which impossible colors bled. You feel it too, don't you? Naruto murmured to the empty air, his voice deeper and more measured than in his youth. At 30, the seventh Hokage had grown into a man whose presence commanded respect without effort. Gone was the brash child who shouted for attention. In his place stood a leader whose quiet words carried weight. The strange energy pulsing through the village had woken him from a dreamless sleep, pulling him from his bed with an urgency he couldn't ignore. Now, as he extended his senses in sage mode, golden rings appearing around his cerulean eyes, he realized the disturbance wasn't just in Konoha. It extended beyond anything he could comprehend. When he reached for natural energy, instead of the familiar currents of his world, he touched something vast and ancient that responded to his call with unexpected eagerness. It flooded into him, not just from the earth beneath his feet, but from somewhere beyond the tear in the sky, beyond the boundaries of his dimension. Pain lanced through his body, driving him to one knee. The markings of sage mode twisted and changed, spreading across his skin in patterns resembling scales. Through gritted teeth, Naruto fought to control the overwhelming power as memories that weren't his cascaded through his mind. Stars being born and dying. Worlds forming and crumbling. The breath of creation itself moving between realities. You're handling this remarkably well for a mortal, came a voice like crystal bells, precise and musical. Most would have been obliterated by now. Naruto spun, instinctively dropping into a defensive stance despite the agony still reverberating through his body. The woman, if she could be called that, floated several inches above the stone. Her tall staff held casually in one delicate blue hand. Her white hair was pulled into a high ponytail, and her clothing was unlike anything from any nation Naruto had encountered. "Who are you?" he demanded, keeping his voice steady despite the sensation of his cells reconstructing themselves with every passing second. "What's happening to me?" The elegant being tilted her head, studying him with ancient eyes. "My name is Vados, attendant angel of Universe 6. And what's happening to you? Naruto Uzumaki is awakening." She gestured toward the tear in the sky with her staff. "Reality is fracturing across the multiverse. The barriers between dimensions are failing, and you are responding to it." Naruto's eyes narrowed, not relaxing his stance. "How do you know my name? And what do you mean by awakening?" A subtle smile curved Vados's lips. "I know many things across many realities. As for your awakening," she moved closer, her movements graceful and unhurried. "Have you never wondered why you could connect so effortlessly with natural energy? Why the tailed beasts recognized something in you beyond your heritage? Why you alone could unite them?" Before Naruto could respond, another surge of foreign energy coursed through him, bringing new visions. A massive dragon whose scales reflected not light but entire galaxies, its eyes bearing same ringed pattern now manifesting in his own. "What you're experiencing," Vados continued, "is the re-emergence of your true nature. You are not merely Naruto Uzumaki, child of prophecy and seventh Hokage. You are the reincarnation of Ryujin, the dragon god of balance, whose duty was to maintain harmony between dimensions." Naruto shook his head, fighting against the weight of these revelations. "That's impossible. I'm the son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. I was the Jinchuriki of Kurama." "All true," Vados interrupted, her staff tapping once against nothing, creating ripples in the air itself. "But incomplete. Gods often incarnate as mortals, experiencing life from within rather than observing from without. Your soul chose this vessel, this life, knowing the time would come when the multiverse would need you again." Another tremor shook the earth beneath them, and more tears appeared in the sky, revealing glimpses of unfamiliar worlds and strange energies. The convergence has begun sooner than anticipated, Vados said, a rare note of concern in her otherwise composed voice. We don't have time for your disbelief, Lord Ryujin. The multiverse requires your intervention. Naruto stood straight, the pain finally subsiding as his body completed whatever transformation had begun. I don't know about any dragon god, but I do know I won't let my world, or any world, face destruction if I can prevent it. Vados smiled, something like approval in her ancient eyes. Then perhaps you remember more than you realize. She extended her staff toward him. Take hold. IWILL help you access the memories and power you need. Then we must travel to the nexus point where the first breach occurred. Hesitating only briefly, Naruto reached out. The moment his fingers touched the staff, energy surged between them, not chakra, but something purer, more fundamental. The scales on his skin gleamed golden, and his eyes shifted from blue to amber with vertical slits. Knowledge poured into him. Techniques beyond any shinobi art, understanding of energies beyond chakra, memories of watching universes form and galaxies spin into existence. Yet through it all, he remained Naruto, his human experiences and connections anchoring him against the tide of divinity. When the transfer ended, he opened eyes that now saw beyond the visible spectrum, beyond the limitations of human perception. He could see the energy lines connecting all living things, the fractures in reality spreading like cracks in glass, and the multiple layers of existence stacked upon each other. I remember, he said softly. Not everything, but enough. Vados nodded. It will return gradually. We've restored enough for now. Too much divine consciousness would overwhelm your mortal form. Naruto looked down at his hands, now bearing faint golden scale patterns that seemed to shift beneath his skin. This power, it's different from chakra or senjutsu. It's divine ki, Vados explained, the energy that flows between universes rather than within them. Combined with your mastery of chakra and natural energy, it makes you uniquely capable of sealing the breaches. Another tremor shook Konoha, stronger than before. In the distance, Naruto could hear shouts of alarm and see lights appearing in windows. I need to warn the village, he said, turning toward the Hokage Tower where his advisors would be gathering. Vados shook her head. Time moves differently between dimensions. We can return to this exact moment after addressing the source of the disturbance. Her expression grew serious. If we fail to contain this, there will be no village to return to. Naruto's jaw tightened as he weighed his responsibilities. Finally, he nodded. Let's go. But I want your word that we'll return here in time to protect my people. You have it, Vados replied. Now, we must travel to the breach point. The dimensional rifts are most severe in a world quite different from yours, one where magic rather than chakra is the dominant force. She raised her staff, creating a sphere of light that expanded to envelop them both. Brace yourself, Lord Ryujin. Dimensional travel can be disorienting for those unaccustomed to it. The world around them dissolved into streams of light and color. Naruto felt simultaneously compressed to the size of an atom and expanded across infinite space. Through it all, Vados remained a constant presence, guiding their trajectory through what appeared to be a tunnel of kaleidoscopic energy. Focus on your core, her voice instructed, somehow clear despite the maelstrom surrounding them. Remember who you are, both mortal and divine. Naruto centered himself, drawing on years of meditation practice. He could feel his two natures, human and God, struggling to reconcile. Rather than fighting against either, he accepted both, allowing them to exist in parallel. The journey ended abruptly as reality reasserted itself around them. They materialized in a dense forest unlike any in the elemental nations, the trees towering hundreds of feet overhead, their trunks wide as buildings. The air hummed with unfamiliar energy, not chakra, but something wilder and less structured. Where are we? Naruto asked, his enhanced senses cataloging the strange environment. The continent of beasts, Vados replied. A world where magic manifests primarily through mana rather than chakra networks. And where the barriers between human and animal have blurred. The first major dimensional breach occurred here. As if to punctuate her statement, the ground shook violently. And a massive rift tore open the air 50 feet ahead, revealing a swirling vortex of chaotic energy. From within emerged creatures that defied description, amalgamations of flesh and shaw. Tao with too many limbs and eyes that burned with unnatural light. Void entities, Vados explained, her expression grave. They exist in the space between dimensions. The breaches allow them passage into realms they should never touch. The creatures sensed their presence immediately, twisting toward them with hungry focus. Naruto stepped forward, instinctively channeling his newly awakened power alongside his familiar techniques. Shadow Clone Jutsu, he called, but what materialized were not the ordinary duplicates he'd created thousands of times before. These clones shimmered with golden energy, more substantial than any he'd ever produced. Interesting, Vados observed. Your techniques are being enhanced by divine ki. These constructs are partially divine themselves. The enhanced clones engage the void creatures. Their movements faster and more fluid than normal human limits would allow. Naruto himself moved with impossible speed, his body feeling lighter yet more powerful than ever before. When a particularly massive entity lunged at him, Naruto didn't dodge. Instead, he met it head-on, his fist connecting with its center mass. The impact released a shock wave that flattened the surrounding vegetation and sent the creature shrieking back into the rift. The breach, Vados called out, pointing to the rift with her staff. You must seal it before more emerge. Naruto nodded, dispelling his clones and focusing his attention on the dimensional tier. Drawing on his newly accessed memories, he performed a series of hand seals unlike any used in ninjutsu, channeling divine ki through the movements. Dimensional boundary restoration, he intoned, feeling the words rise from somewhere deep in his subconscious. Golden chains of energy erupted from his palms, weaving together to form a net that he cast toward the breach. The chains latched onto the edges of reality itself, and Naruto pulled, muscles straining as he literally sewed the fabric of space-time back together. The effort was tremendous, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought against the natural entropy trying to widen the tier. Just as his strength began to falter, he felt a presence beside him, Vados. Her staff glowing as she added her power to his. Your divine energy is still stabilizing, she explained. Allow me to supplement it this once. With their combined effort, the breach slowly closed, reality knitting itself back together until only a faint scar remained in the air where the rift had been. Naruto exhaled heavily, his body trembling from the exertion. That was intense, he admitted. You performed admirably for your first conscious breach sealing, Vados said, lowering her staff. But this is merely one of dozens forming across the multiverse. Before Naruto could respond, a bestial roar echoed through the forest, followed by the sound of trees crashing down. Something massive was moving toward them at incredible speed. We have company, Naruto observed, dropping into a ready stance. Vados didn't seem concerned. An inhabitant of this world, powerful by its standards, but not our immediate concern. The source of the disturbance burst through the tree line, a leonine figure with a feminine humanoid upper body, powerful clawed hands gripping an enormous greatsword. Her mane of wild hair framed a fierce face with predatory eyes that immediately locked onto Naruto. Intruders, she growled, her voice surprisingly refined despite its feral undertone. You're responsible for this disturbance. No, Naruto replied calmly, sensing the tremendo's combat experience in the way she carried herself. We just sealed the breach. The beast woman narrowed her eyes, sword still at the ready. I saw the golden light. Felt power unlike any magic I've encountered. Her gaze shifted between them. You're not from this world. Perceptive, Vados commented. You stand before Lord Ryujin, dragon god of balance, currently incarnated as Naruto Uzumaki. I am Vados, his guide. The beast woman's eyes widened slightly before narrowing again with suspicion. I am Ghislaine Dedoldia, sword king of the North god style. And I've lived long enough to know. Gods don't simply appear without reason. She pointed her massive blade at Naruto. Prove your divinity or face my steel. Naruto studied her stance, recognizing a warrior testing potential threats rather than seeking needless combat. I don't need to prove anything, he replied evenly. But I understand your caution. Your world is in danger. Not from us, but from the rifts appearing throughout reality. Ghislaine didn't lower her sword. Words mean nothing. Action defines worth. A small smile tugged at Naruto's lips, reminding him of his own youth when he'd needed to prove himself through deeds rather than titles. Very well, he conceded, stepping forward. A demonstration, then, but not a fight. There are more creatures coming through smaller breaches nearby. If you want proof of my intentions, help us seal them. As if on cue, multiple smaller rifts tore open throughout the forest, each disgorging void entities that immediately began attacking the local wildlife. Distant roars and screams indicated the chaos was spreading. Ghislaine's ears twitched as she processed the sounds. Fine, she growled, lowering her sword slightly. I'll judge you by how you protect this land. Naruto nodded, then closed his eyes briefly, expanding his senses beyond normal perception. With his enhanced awareness, he could feel the locations of every breach within miles. 3 major rifts, he reported, opening eyes that now glowed with golden light. Northeast, west, and south of our position. Dozens of entities emerging from each. Ghislaine looked impressed despite herself. You sensed all that without magic. It's not magic or chakra, Naruto explained. It's something more fundamental. He turned to Vados. Can you handle the southern breach? I'll take the northeast. Of course, Vados replied with a slight bow. Though I suggest keeping our new acquaintance with you. Her knowledge of this world may prove useful. Ghislaine bristled. I don't need assignment like some subordinate. Not assignment, Naruto corrected. Partnership. I don't know this world or its dangers. You do. The Sword King studied him for a moment, then nodded curtly. The northeast breach is near a settlement. If you truly wish to prove yourself, we should hurry. Without waiting for a response, she bounded into the forest with surprising speed for her size. Naruto followed easily, his enhanced physiology allowing him to keep pace without effort. As they traveled, he observed her fighting style as they encountered smaller void entities. Ghislaine wielded her massive blade with precision and economy of movement. Each strike calculated and decisive. There was beauty in her ferocity, a disciplined grace that spoke of decades mastering her craft. Your swordsmanship is impressive, he commented after she bisected a particularly large creature with a single stroke. Save your flattery, she replied, though her tail swished in what might have been pleasure at the recognition. The settlement is just ahead. They emerged from the dense forest to find a village built around enormous tree trunks, elevated platforms connected by bridges swaying in the wind. Below, a group of beast folk, some resembling wolves, others bears or felines, were fighting a losing battle against a swarm of void entities that had emerged from a pulsing rift near the village center. Ghislaine accelerated immediately, concern evident in her expression. Those are my people, she growled. Many are untrained in combat. Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder, stopping her momentarily. I can handle the entities. Focus on evacuating your people. She looked ready to argue but assessed the situation with a warrior's pragmatism. Very well, show me this power of yours, Dragon God. Naruto leapt from their position, covering the tremendous distance in a single bound. As he descended toward the village center, he formed a familiar spiraling sphere in his palm, but unlike his normal Rasengan. This one shimmered with golden energy and expanded to massive proportions. Sage Art. Divine Rasengan. He called, driving the enormous sphere into the largest concentration of void entities. The impact was catastrophic for the creatures, the divine energy particularly effective against their otherworldly composition. They disintegrated on contact, leaving no trace of their existence. The display of power momentarily halted the fighting as all eyes turned to the newcomer who had just eliminated dozens of enemies in a single attack. Naruto didn't pause, immediately creating multiple shadow clones that spread throughout the village, each engaging different clusters of void creatures with techniques combining ninjutsu and divine ki. His movements were fluid and precise, never wasting RGY or motion as he systematically cleared areas for Ghislaine to evacuate civilians. The Sword King was equally impressive, her massive blade cleaving through enemies while she coordinated the evacuation with authoritative shouts. Several times, she glanced at Naruto with growing reassessment in her eyes. When most civilians were clear, Naruto focused on the breach itself. This one was larger than the first, its edges more jagged and unstable. Drawing on his newly awakened power, he began the sealing process, divine chains manifesting from his hands. I need time, he called to Ghislaine. The breach is fighting the seal. She immediately positioned herself between him and the remaining entities, her sword a blur of deadly precision. Focus on your task, Dragon God. Nothing will reach you. True to her word, she became an impenetrable barrier, her fighting style adapting to protect rather than attack. Naruto found himself admiring her tactical flexibility and unwavering focus. Concentrating on the breach, he poured more power into the sealing technique, sweat beading on his brow as the dimensional tear resisted his efforts. Drawing deeper on his divine heritage, he accessed a wellspring of energy that transformed the golden chains into brilliant white filaments that pierced the very fabric of reality. With a final surge of power, he pulled the edges of the breach together. Reality itself groaning in protest before finally yielding. The rift sealed with a thunderous crack, a shock wave of displaced energy knocking both Naruto and Ghislaine off their feet. For a moment, they lay stunned on the wooden platform of the village square. Naruto recovered first, moving quickly to Ghislaine's side. "Are you injured?" he asked, helping her to her feet. The Sword King shook her head, her expression unreadable as she studied him. "You fight differently than any warrior I've encountered," she observed. "No wasted movement, no hesitation, yet adaptable to changing circumstances." Naruto accepted the assessment with a nod. "Years of practice, though some of these techniques are newer acquisitions." Ghislaine sheathed her massive blade across her back. "That power you wielded, it felt ancient, primordial." Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Perhaps there is truth to your divine claims." Before Naruto could respond, a ripple of energy washed over them both, and Vados appeared. Her expression unusually grave. "The western breach has collapsed into a dimensional vortex," she announced without preamble. "It's drawing power from multiple realities simultaneously." "What does that mean?" Ghislaine demanded. "It means the situation is deteriorating faster than anticipated," Vados explained. "The convergence isn't merely causing random breaches, it's becoming directional, pulling specific energies from specific dimensions." Naruto frowned. "Someone's manipulating the breaches. Or something," Vados confirmed. "We need to investigate the vortex immediately." Ghislaine stepped forward, her decision apparently made. "I'm coming with you. If this threatens my world, I won't stand idly by." Naruto exchanged a glance with Vados, who offered a subtle nod of approval. "We welcome your assistance, Sword King," he said formally. "Your knowledge of this world and your combat prowess would be valuable assets." For the first time, Ghislaine's stern features softened slightly. "You fight well for an otherworlder, and you protected my people without hesitation." She inclined her head in a gesture of respect. "Perhaps your actions do match your claims, Dragon God." The three set off immediately, Vados creating a transportation sphere that carried them toward the western breach in seconds rather than hours. As they traveled, Naruto could feel the chaotic energies growing stronger. Dimensional fabric thinning around them. When they materialized at their destination, the sight was unlike anything Naruto had seen, even in his recovered divine memories. A massive vortex spun in the air, its center a void of absolute darkness while its edges cycled through different realities, glimpses of worlds both familiar and utterly alien. "By the North God," Ghislaine whispered, her usual confidence momentarily shaken. "What is that?" "A dimensional collapse point," Vados explained, her staff glowing as she analyzed the phenomenon. "Multiple realities are being forcibly merged at this nexus." Naruto stepped closer, his divine senses perceiving energies beyond normal detection. "There's a pattern to it," he observed. "It's not random chaos. There's intent behind the selection of dimensions." As if responding to his presence, the vortex pulsed, its rotation increasing. From its depths emerged a figure, humanoid but composed of shifting energies rather than solid matter. At last, the entity spoke, its voice reverberating across multiple frequencies simultaneously. "The Dragon God awakens. Your timing is impeccable, Ryujin." Naruto stepped forward, placing himself between the entity and his companions. "You know me." A sound like laughter, distorted through layers of reality, emanated from the figure. "I have waited eons for your return." The multiverse grows stagnant, separated into artificial divisions. It yearns to be whole again. "Who are you?" Naruto demanded, divine energy gathering around his hands. "I am Vados, once attendant in the realm between realms." The entity's form solidified slightly, revealing a vaguely masculine shape with features that shifted between different species. "I continued our work while you slumbered in mortal form, preparing for the great convergence." Vados stepped forward, her normally composed features showing alarm. Vados was banished from the divine hierarchy for attempting to collapse the dimensional barriers without authorization. Without authorization, Vados repeated mockingly. As if the natural state of existence requires permission. The multiverse was one before the separation. I merely restore what should never have been divided. Naruto accessed his fragmentary divine memories, searching for information about this being. Flashes of recognition came, a trusted advisor. A philosophical disagreement, a bitter parting. The separation exists for a reason, Naruto said, certainty in his voice despite incomplete memories. Each reality develops according to its own laws and principles. Forcing them together would destroy them all. Vordas's form pulsed with what might have been anger. You speak with a mortal's limited understanding. Your incarnation has clouded your divine perspective. Or perhaps it has clarified it, Naruto countered. I've lived as a mortal, formed bonds, experienced joy and pain within the confines of a single reality. The chi perspective isn't a limitation, it's wisdom you lack. The entity's response was immediate and violent. Tendrils of void energy lashed out from the vortex, targeting not just Naruto but Vados and Ghislaine as well. Naruto moved instinctively, golden energy forming a protective barrier around all three of them. The void tendrils crashed against it, reality itself warping where the energies collided. You cannot stop what has already begun, Vados declared. The convergence accelerates even as we speak. Soon, all dimensions will return to their original, unified state, with or without your blessing. With that declaration, the entity retreated into the vortex, which began spinning more rapidly, pulling matter from the surrounding area into its depths. We need to seal it now, Vados urged. Before it grows too powerful to contain. Naruto nodded, but as he prepared to channel his power, Ghislaine stepped forward. Your sealing technique requires time and concentration, she observed. Allow me to provide a distraction. Without waiting for a response, she charged toward the swirling vortex, her sword glowing with accumulated mana. North God style. Dimensional cleave. She shouted, bringing her blade down in a powerful arc that temporarily disrupted the vortex's rotation. Vados's eyes widened slightly. Remarkable. Her sword technique actually affects dimensional energy. She's buying us time, Naruto said, immediately beginning the complex sequence required for a seal of this magnitude. Let's not waste it, as Ghislaine continued her assault, keeping the vortex destabilized and drawing Vordas's attention. Naruto and Vados worked in tandem. Divine chains from Naruto interwove with energy filaments from Vados's staff, creating a complex lattice around the dimensional breach. Sweat poured down Naruto's face as he poured more power into the seal, drawing on both his chakra and newly awakened divine ki. The effort was tremendous, far exceeding what he'd experienced with the previous breaches. It's resisting, he gritted out, muscles straining as though he were physically wrestling with reality itself. Vados is actively fighting our efforts from within, Vados explained, her own serene expression showing traces of strain. We need more power to complete the seal. Ghislaine, hearing their exchange, disengaged from her assault and fell back to their position. What do you need? She asked directly, her breathing heavy but her stance still strong. Naruto assessed her quickly. Your sword, it has properties that affect dimensional energy. If you can channel your mana through our sealing matrix, it might provide the additional force we need. The Sword King nodded without hesitation. Tell me where to strike. Vados indicated a specific point in their energy construct. There, where the pattern forms a spiral. Your blade must pierce the exact center while channeling your strongest technique. Ghislaine took position, her mana flaring around her sword as she concentrated her power. North God style. Ultimate technique, reality fang. Her blade plunged into the specified point, and the effect was immediate. The energy construct flared brilliantly. The combined powers of divine ki, angelic energy, and beast mana creating a seal more powerful than any Naruto could have formed alone. With a sound like thunder magnified 1,000-fold, the vortex collapsed in on itself. Dimensional energies imploding rather than exploding. A final howl of rage from Vados echoed across realities before silence fell. The three stood together, each exhausted in their own way, as the forest around them gradually returned to normal. Birds cautiously resumed their songs, and the wind once again stirred the leaves of the massive trees. Is it over? Ghislaine asked, retrieving her blade from where it had embedded itself in the ground after the sealing. No, Vados replied solemnly. This was merely one manifestation of the convergence. Tus has clearly been preparing for this for eons. There will be more breaches, more attempts to merge realities. Naruto nodded, feeling the truth of her words in his partially awakened divine consciousness. He's targeting specific dimensions, ones with unique energy properties that, when combined, could accelerate the convergence. Then what's next? Ghislaine demanded, practical as ever. Where do we go from here? Vados turned to her, a slight smile on her lips. The Sword King didn't flinch under the angel's gaze. My world is threatened. You two clearly need assistance. The dragon god nearly collapsed from exertion. And you yourself admitted the sealing required more power than you possessed alone. Naruto chuckled despite his fatigue. She has a point. Vados inclined her head in acknowledgement. Indeed, your assistance was invaluable, Sword King. Her expression grew serious again. As for our next destination, we must follow the energy signature to the next targeted dimension. I can sense another breach forming in a world where magic manifests through grimoires and spiritual mana. Before we go, Naruto interjected, I need to understand more about what we're facing. He turned to Vados. You knew Vados. What exactly is his endgame? Simply merging all dimensions. Vados' ancient eyes clouded with something like regret. Vados believes that the natural street 8 of existence is unity, one reality containing all possibilities. When the original universe became too complex to sustain itself, it was divided into the multiverse we know today. And he wants to reverse that process. Naruto concluded. Yes, but such a merger now would be catastrophic. The dimensions have evolved independently for too long. Their fundamental laws often contradict each other. Forcing them together would result not in harmonious unity but in mutual annihilation. Ghislaine's tail twitched thoughtfully. How does this connect to the dragon god's awakening? This Vados med almost pleased that Naruto had regained his divine powers. A shadow passed over Vados' face. That is concerning. In ancient times, only the combined power of all dragon gods could enact or reverse a dimensional separation of this magnitude. Naruto's eyes widened with sudden understanding. He needs my power. The convergence is just preparation. He's trying to awaken my divine nature to harness it. Precisely. Vados confirmed. Which means we must be extraordinarily careful. Each time you use your divine abilities, your awakening accelerates. Yet we need those same abilities to combat the breaches. A calculated risk, Ghislaine observed, sheathing her sword. But one we must take. Naruto looked at the battle-hardened warrior, respect evident in his gaze. Are you certain you wish to join us? This fight will take us far beyond your world, facing dangers unlike anything in your experience. Ghislaine met his eyes unflinchingly. I did not earn the title of Sword King by avoiding challenges, Dragon God. Besides, she added with the barest hint of a smile, someone needs to ensure you don't collapse after every sealing. Naruto laughed, a warm sound that seemed to brighten the forest around them. I can't argue with that. He turned to Vados. Ready when you are. The angel nodded, raising her staff to create another transportation sphere. The next breach is already forming. We must hurry. As the sphere expanded to envelop them, Naruto felt a strange sense of rightness in their unlikely trio, the incarnated god still reconciling his dual nature, the ancient angel with her inscrutable wisdom, and the fierce beast warrior with her straightforward honor. Different as they were, something about their combined strengths felt balanced in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Perhaps, he thought as reality dissolved around them once again, this was why the dragon god of balance had chosen to experience mortality, to understand that true harmony came not from uniformity but from the conscious integration of differences. The transportation sphere carried them between dimensions, a journey that should have been disorienting but felt increasingly natural too. Naruto as more of his divine consciousness awakened. He could sense Ghislaine's discomfort beside him, though the proud warrior made no complaint. Focus on your center, he advised quietly. Imagine yourself as an anchor point that reality moves around, rather than something moving through reality. Ghislaine shot him a surprised glance before closing her eyes and following his suggestion. Her posture relaxed slightly as she adapted to the interdimensional travel. You're a quick study, Vados observed, genuine approval in her tone. Survival demands adaptation, Ghislaine responded simply. The sphere dissipated, depositing them in a world bathed in magical energy so dense it was visible to the naked eye as colored mist swirling through the air. They stood atop a cliff overlooking a vast kingdom where enormous towers rose from a walled city, each glowing with different colored light. The Clover Kingdom, Vados announced. A world where magic is categorized by elemental affinity. And social standing is determined by magical potential. Naruto immediately sensed the dimensional instability, a growing distortion in the sky above the tallest tower at the kingdom's center. Unlike the violent breaches in Ghislaine's world, this one was forming slowly, methodically, as though being carefully constructed rather than torn open. Something's different about this breach, he noted, his enhanced senses detecting the subtle patterns. It's being created from within this dimension, not forced from outside. Vados has agents in multiple realities, Vados confirmed grimly. Individuals who believe the convergence will bring them greater power or knowledge. Ghislaine growled low in her throat. Collaborators, often unwitting ones, Vados clarified. Many believe they're accessing beneficial energies from beyond their world, unaware they're contributing to its potential destruction. A tremendous surge of magic erupted from the central tower, accelerating the breach formation. In response, alarms began sounding throughout the kingdom, and figures could be seen flying toward the disturbance, mages mounted on brooms or carried by various magical constructs. They're responding to the threat, Naruto observed, but conventional magic won't seal a dimensional breach. No, Vados agreed, but their efforts may buy us time to position ourselves correctly. This breach is more complex than the others, its formation pattern suggests it's designed to connect with specific other dimensions simultaneously. A hub, Naruto realized. Vados is trying to create a dimensional hub that connects multiple realities at once. Ghislaine unsheathed her sword, the blade gleaming in the magical light. Then we destroy it before it's complete. It's not that simple, Vados cautioned. Attacking an incomplete breach could cause an uncontrolled collapse, potentially damaging multiple dimensions in unpredictable ways. Then what's our approach? Naruto asked, already analyzing possible strategies. We need to reach the source, whoever or whatever is generating the breach from this side, Vados explained. Stop them first, then seal the partially formed opening. Naruto nodded, then turned to Ghislaine. Your combat experience will be valuable if we encounter resistance. But we need to be diplomatic if possible. The locals may not understand what they're involved in. The Sword King huffed but nodded her agreement. I can be measured when necessary. A small smile tugged at Naruto's lips before he returned his attention to the growing breach. Let's move. Rather than teleporting directly into a potentially hostile situation, they made their way toward the central tower on foot, Naruto using transformed shadow clones to blend them into the local population. As they moved through the streets of the capital, they observed the society around them, a rigid hierarchy evident in the quality of clothing and the deference shown to those with more elaborate magical tools. This world divides its people based on magical ability, Vados explained quietly as they walked. Those born with greater power enjoy privileges others can only dream of. Ghislaine's tail twitched with disapproval beneath her illusory human disguise. Power should be earned through discipline and training, not merely inherited. A philosophy your world and Naruto's share, Vados noted. Though expressed differently in each. Naruto remained silent, his attention divided between their surroundings and the steadily growing breach overhead. With each passing minute, the dimensional distortion expanded, colors from other realities bleeding through the thinning barriers. They were halfway to the central tower when a tremendous explosion rocked the city. A sect. Ion of the tower's upper levels collapsed, and through the debris emerged a colossal creature, part machine, part organic matter, its surface crawling with magical circuits that pulsed in time with the breach's expansion. A dimensional anchor, Vados identified, dropping all pretense of disguise. An artificial construct designed to stabilize the breach point. Around them, panic erupted as citizens fled the falling debris. Knights in magical armor converged on the tower, attacking the construct with various elemental magics that seemed to have minimal effect. They can't stop it, Naruto observed, his own disguise dissolving as he channeled divine ki. We need to intervene now. Without waiting for a response, he leapt upward, covering the tremendous distance to the tower in a single bound. Ghislaine followed close behind, her beast form fully revealed as she propelled herself with mana-enhanced strength. Vados simply teleported, appearing beside them as they landed on what remained of the tower's upper platform. The construct noticed them immediately, mechanical components whirring as it adjusted its focus. Magical energy gathered at its center, forming into a pulsing orb of destructive potential. "Scatter," Naruto commanded, diving to one side as the construct released its attack. The blast obliterated what remained of the platform, forcing them to relocate to adjacent rooftops. From their new positions, they could see knights regrouping for another assault while civilians continued to evacuate the surrounding area. "We need to coordinate with the local forces," Naruto decided. Creating several shadow clones. "Find whoever's in charge and explain the situation." As the clones dispersed, the original Naruto turned to Vados. "Can you determine where the breach is being generated from? There must be someone or something controlling this construct." The angel closed her eyes briefly, her staff glowing as she scanned the dimensional energies. "Below," she finally said. "Deep beneath the tower, I sense a concentrated magical signature interfacing directly with the breach." Ghislaine pointed her sword toward a group of particularly well-armored knights gathering near the tower base. "Those warriors appear to be their elite forces. They may know more." Before they could approach, however, a wall of intense flames erupted between them and their destination. From within the fire emerged a woman with long, wild crimson hair and fierce eyes, wearing armor emblazoned with a lion's crest. Magical energy radiated from her in palpable waves, her mana sign. Dwarfing those of the knights around her. "Identify yourselves," she demanded, flames dancing around her clenched fists. "You're not from any magic knight squad I recognize." Naruto stepped forward, his posture non-threatening but confident. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. These are my companions, Vados and Ghislaine. We've come to help seal the dimensional breach and stop whatever's creating it." The woman's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "I am Marioliona Vermilion, captain of the Crimson Lion Kings. And I don't recall requesting outside assistance for a Clover Kingdom matter." "This isn't merely a Clover Kingdom matter," Vados interjected smoothly. "The breach threatens multiple dimensions, including yours. It's part of a larger convergence event that could destroy reality as you know it." Marioliona's flames intensified, her expression unchanged. "Convenient explanation. Meanwhile, that construct appeared immediately after your arrival in our city. If we wished to attack your kingdom," Ghislaine growled, her patience visibly thinning, "we wouldn't bother with elaborate constructs. We would simply act." The tension between them was palpable, magic and mana crackling in the air. Naruto recognized the situation's volatility. Marioliona was protecting her people, and they were unknown entities appearing during a crisis. "Captain Vermilion," he said calmly, "we understand your suspicion. In your position, I would feel the same." He held out his hand, palm up, creating a small golden sphere of divine ki. "But this energy I wield is specifically designed to seal dimensional breaches. If you'll allow us to demonstrate, we can help end this crisis before more people are harmed." Marioliona studied him intently, her primal instincts clearly assessing the sincerity of his words and the nature of his power. After a moment, the flames around her diminished slightly. "One demonstration," she conceded. "But my knights will be ready to intervene if you attempt anything suspicious." Naruto nodded, then turned toward the construct, which was continuing its rampage through the tower's upper levels. Channeling divine ki into his palm, he formed a Rasengan infused with golden energy. "Divine Sage Art. Dimensional Stabilization Sphere," he called, compressing the energy into a dense, focused point. With precision honed through years of combat, he launched the SP. Here toward a section of the breach directly above the construct. Upon contact, the technique expanded rapidly, golden energy spreading across the dimensional tear like a sealing matrix. The effect was immediate. The portion of the breach contacted by the energy stabilized, its chaotic fluctuations ceasing as reality reasserted itself in that section. The construct below reacted violently, its vehemence becoming erratic as it lost connection with the dimensional energy it had been channeling. Marioliona's eyes widened slightly, professional assessment overriding suspicion. "That's not any magic I've encountered." "It's not magic," Naruto explained. "At least, not as your world understands it. Before he could elaborate further, the construct launched itself upward, mechanical limbs exed, ending toward the partially sealed breach as though attempting to tear it open again. Naruto prepared to intercept it, but Mereoleona moved faster, her form blurring with incredible speed as she unleashed a devastating fire magic attack. Calidus Brachium Purgatory, she roared, her entire body erupting in flames so intense they appeared white at their core. Her assault connected with devastating force, melting through the construct's outer layers and exposing its core, a pulsating crystal that glowed with the same energy as the breach itself. The control nexus, Vados identified. Destroy it, and the construct will deactivate. Quote. Ghislaine didn't hesitate, leaping into the air with her sword raised high. North God style. Severing strike. The massive blade came down with precision, cl. Eaving through the weakened sections to strike directly at the crystal core. The construct shuddered violently as the blade connected, magical circuits overloading and exploding in cascading failures throughout its form. With a final mechanical wail, it collapsed, sections crashing down onto the already damaged tower. Mereoleona turned back to them, reassessment evident in her gaze. You fight well for outsiders. She acknowledged grudgingly. But the breach remains, and you mentioned something creating it from below. Naruto nodded. Whatever's generating the breach is beneath the tower. We need to reach it quickly before the partial sealing fails. The captain considered for only a moment before making her decision. I'll take you. My flames can clear any obstacle. She turned to her knights. Secure the perimeter and continue evacuation procedures. No one enters the tower until I return. Without waiting for acknowledgement, she leapt toward the damaged structure, flames propelling her across the gap. Naruto, Vados, and Ghislaine followed closely, descending through the wreckage toward the tower's foundation. As they penetrated deeper beneath the surface, the ambient magic grew denser, more oppressive. The walls themselves pulsed with arcane symbols that hadn't been visible from above. These are ancient binding spells, Mereoleona explained, her flames providing illumination as they descended. This section of the tower predates the Clover Kingdom itself. They're containing something, Vados observed, studying the symbols with ancient eyes. Something that was never meant to be released. The captain nodded grimly. According to our records, the first wizard king sealed a malevolent entity here centuries ago. The tower was built above it as both prison and monitoring station. And now someone's trying to use it to generate a dimensional breach, Naruto concluded. Vados must have communicated with whatever's down here. They reached a massive stone door covered in sealing magic so complex it resembled a work of art more than functional spellwork. Yet despite its obvious importance, the door stood partially open, the seals disrupted by what appeared to be a controlled magical discharge. This was opened recently, Mereoleona stated, examining the damage. From the outside, an inside job, Ghislaine growled. Someone with access to your kingdom's secrets. The captain's expression darkened. When we find them, they'll wish the construct had been more thorough in its destruction. Beyond the damaged door lay a vast circular chamber, its walls lined with crystals that amplified magical energy. At the chamber's center stood a figure in elaborate robes, hands raised toward a swirling vortex of magic that connected directly to the breach above. Behind them, suspended in a massive crystalline structure, was a shadowy entity whose form seemed to constantly shift and change. Julius, Mereoleona breathed, shock evident in her voice. What are you doing here? The robed figure turned, revealing the face of a middle-aged man with strange markings on his forehead and an expression of fanatic devotion. Captain Vermilion, you're too late to stop the convergence. Julius Novachrono, the captain explained tersely to her companions. The Wizard King, the highest authority in our magical hierarchy. Not exactly, Vados corrected, her eyes narrowing as she studied the man. That's not your Wizard King, at least not entirely. He's been influenced by dimensional energy, his aura shows clear signs of corruption. The man who looked like Julius smiled unnaturally. Corruption? No, enlightenment. Vados showed me visions of a unified reality where magic knows no boundaries, where time and space bend to true will. He gestured toward the entity behind him. This ancient one knows the truth. It has existed since before the separation of dimensions. Naruto assessed the situation quickly. The entity in the crystal was clearly feeding power to the breach. Using the man as a conduit and control mechanism. Breaking that connection would be key to stopping the process. Julius, he called, stepping forward. I am Ryujin, the dragon god of balance. The being you're communicating with, Vados, isn't telling you everything. The convergence won't create a utopia. It will destroy all realities, including yours. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Julius's face before the influence reasserted itself. Lies. Ryujin abandoned his duty to maintain separation. Vados continues the true work, reunification of all that was divided without cause. Without cause, Naruto repeated incredulously. The separation prevented mutual annihilation. Different dimensions operate under different fundamental laws, forcing them together now would be catastrophic. As they spoke, Naruto subtly signaled to his companions, indicating positions around the chamber. Understanding immediately, they began moving to surround the core. Up did Wizard King and the entity he was channeling. Julius noticed their movement and smiled coldly. Your tactical approach is predictable, Dragon God. Time magic. Chronostasis. Golden clocks appeared around Ghislaine and Marioliona, freezing them in place as time itself halted in their immediate vicinity. Only Vados remained unaffected, her angelic nature providing immunity to temporal manipulation. Impressive magic, she commented, her staff glowing with mounting power. But time is merely another dimension to beings like us. With a single gesture, she disrupted the spell, freeing the others from their temporal prison. Julius's expression shifted to one of genuine surprise before hardening with resolve. The Ancient One grants me power beyond normal magic, he declared, drawing on the entity's energy. Time magic combination. Dimensional acceleration. The air around them distorted as time and space began to warp unpredictably. Objects aged and crumbled, then reversed to pristine condition. Sections of the chamber expanded while others contracted. Through it all, the breach overhead grew larger, its connection to the chamber strengthening. Marioliona charged forward, flames cutting through the distorted space. I don't know what's happened to you, Julius, but as a Magic Knight captain, I cannot allow this to continue. Her attack met a barrier of compressed time. Flames freezing in midair before being reversed and dissipated. Julius didn't even acknowledge her effort, his focus entirely on maintaining the connection with the entity and the breach. Ghislaine circled to the opposite side, her sword glowing with accumulated mana. Physical attacks won't penetrate that defense. We need to disrupt the source. Naruto nodded, analyzing the flow of energies with his divine perception. The entity in the crystal is the key. It's using Julius as a willing conduit, but the true power comes from its connection to Vados across dimensions. Can you sever that connection? Vados asked. Not directly, Naruto admitted. But I might be able to establish a competing link. He closed his eyes, accessing more of his dormant divine consciousness. As Ryujin, I should be able to communicate with it directly. Extending his awareness beyond physical limitations, Naruto reached toward the entity's consciousness. The contact was immediate and overwhelming, ancient beyond comprehension. The being existed partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its perception utterly alien to human understanding. Images flooded Naruto's mind, the original unified reality, the traumatic separation. Eons of fragmented existence, and Vordas's promise of restoration. But beneath these surface thoughts lay deeper truths, the entity's fear of complete dissolution. Its desperate loneliness as a being that belonged nowhere entirely, and the pain of existing in a fragmented state across incompatible dimensions. You are not alone, Naruto communicated, not with words but with concepts and emotions. The separation was not rejection but protection. Your existence matters, but reunification would destroy everything, including yourself. The entity's response was a complex mixture of longing, doubt, and ancient weariness. Images of Vordas's promises contrasted with glimpses of what Naruto claimed would happen, the violent collision of contradictory physical laws, the unraveling of reality itself. I can help you find balance, Naruto continued, drawing on Ryujin's inherent nature. Not through destructive convergence but through harmony within separation. There are others like you, beings who exist across boundaries. You don't need to destroy reality to find belonging. For a moment, the connection wavered as the entity considered his words. Then, with shocking suddenness, it lashed out, not at Naruto, but at Julius, severing the corrupting influence that had been controlling the Wizard King. Julius collapsed to his knees, the unnatural light ding from his eyes as his true self reasserted control. The magical vortex connecting to the breach destabilized, energies fluctuating wildly without direction. Now, Vados called. The breach is vulnerable. Naruto didn't hesitate, channeling divine ki through his hands to form the sealing chains once more. This time, however, he added something new, a variation that incorporated the entity's OWN multidimensional nature into the seal, creating not just a barrier but a stabilized connection point. Divine art. Harmonic boundary restoration. The golden chains shot upward, piercing through floors and ceilings to reach the breach above. Upon contact, they expanded into a complex matrix that didn't simply force the breach closed but restructured it, transforming chaotic dimensional bleeding into controlled, stable interconnection. The effort was tremendous, far exceeding previous ceilings. Naruto felt his divine energy depleting rapidly, his mortal form struggling to channel such power. Just as his knees began to buckle, he felt support on either side, Ghislaine and Marioliona, lending their strength physically while Vados channeled her angelic energy to supplement his fading reserves. With a final surge of combined power, the seal completed. The breach above didn't vanish entirely but contracted to a stable point of silvery light, a controlled connection rather than a destructive tear. Exhausted, Naruto would have collapsed if not for his companion's support. "It's done," he managed, his voice hoarse with effort. "The breach is contained." Marioliona looked upward, her sharp eyes assessing the transformed dimensional opening. "Not sealed completely." "No," Vados explained. "Naruto created something new, a controlled access point that allows limited communication between dimensions without the destructive effects of a full breach. For the entity," Naruto clarified, nodding toward the crystal where the shadowy being now appeared calmer, its erratic movements ceased. "It needs connection to other dimensions to exist, but not the catastrophic convergence Vados was planning." Julius slowly rose to his feet, his face lined with shame and exhaustion. "I don't understand what happened. I was studying ancient texts about dimensional theory when I heard a voice, offering knowledge beyond anything in our archives." "Vados," Vados confirmed. "He's been eking agents across multiple dimensions, particularly those with influence and access to powerful artifacts or entities." The Wizard King looked at the transformed breach with wonder and regret. "He showed me visions of unlimited magical potential, a world without barriers or limitations." His gaze dropped. "I should have recognized the deception." Marioliona's expression remained stern, but her voice held surprising compassion. "Even the wisest can be deceived, Julius. What matters is that you broke free when the truth was revealed." Ghislaine sheathed her sword, studying the contained entity with professional assessment. "What happens to this creature now?" "It will serve as a guardian of this stable connection point," Naruto explained, gradually recovering his strength. "Monitoring dimensional energies rather than disrupting them. And warning us if Vados attempts another breach," Vados added. "It's chosen balance over chaos." Julius approached them, his natural dignity reasserting itself despite recent events. "I owe you all a tremendous debt, as does the entire Clover Kingdom. If there's anything within my power to offer in gratitude." Naruto exchanged glances with his companions before responding. "Actually, there is something. We're tracking similar breaches across multiple dimensions. Your knowledge of magical theory and temporal magic could be invaluable in predicting where Vados might strike next." Marioliona stepped forward before Julius could respond. "If you're recruiting allies against this threat, you'll need combat specialists as well as theoreticians." Her flames briefly flared around her clenched fists. "I volunteer my services." Ghislaine raised an eyebrow at the captain's declaration, but said nothing, her tail swishing with what might have been amusement. "Are you certain?" Naruto asked, studying the fierce captain. "This journey will take you far beyond your kingdom, facing dangers unlike anything in your experience." Marioliona's smile was predatory and confident. "I've spent years seeking worthy challenges to test my limits. A multidimensional crisis threatening all reality. That sounds appropriately interesting." Julius nodded his approval. "Captain Vermilion is among our strongest magic knights. Her assistance would be more valuable in direct combat than mine." He turned to Marioliona. "I'll ensure your squad is properly led in your absence." The fiery captain accepted this with a nod before returning her attention to Naruto. So, Dragon God, when do we depart? Vados consulted her staff, its glow reflecting complex energetic patterns. Another breach is already forming. This one in a dimension where spiritual energy manifests through Zanpakuto, soul-bonded weapons wielded by death gods. Soul Society, Naruto murmured, accessing his expanding divine memory. A realm between life and death where balance is paramount. A fitting next destination for the god of balance, Ghislaine observed. Marioliona looked between them, curiosity evident beneath her fierce exterior. Death gods and soul weapons. This grows more intriguing by the moment. As Vados prepared for their dimensional transfer, Naruto took a final moment to commune with the entity in the crystal. Unlike their earlier chaotic connection, this communication felt balanced, harmonious. Watch for Vados, he instructed. Alert Julius if you sense his influence. The entity's acknowledgement came as a gentle pulse of multidimensional awareness, a promise made not from coercion but from aligned purpose. As the transportation sphere formed around them, Naruto looked at his growing company of allies, the elegant angel with her ancient wisdom, the proud beast warrior with her unflinching honor, and now the fierce fire captain with her unbridled determination. Different as they were, each brought unique strengths and perspectives to their shared mission. Perhaps, he reflected as they departed for the next dimension, this was the true meaning of balance, not uniform sameness, but harmonious diversity united by common purpose. The dimensional sphere dissolved around them, reality restructuring itself into an entirely new configuration as they arrived in the world of Soul Society. Their journey to stop the convergence had only just begun. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, The Sword King's Challenge. Soul Society materialized around them in a shimmer of spiritual particles, its traditional Japanese architecture a stark contrast to the medieval European aesthetics of the Clover Kingdom. The group appeared on a hillside overlooking Seraite, the court of pure souls, where white towers and interconnected buildings housed the soul reapers who maintained balance between the living and dead. Marioliona staggered slightly, unused to interdimensional travel. By the spirits, she muttered, flames instinctively flickering around her clenched fists as she regained her equilibrium. Does that sensation ever become tolerable? Eventually, Ghislaine replied, her beast-like features scanning their surroundings with predatory assessment. Unlike her companions, the Sword King showed no discomfort from their journey, having already adapted to dimensional transitions with remarkable speed. Naruto remained silent, his enhanced senses extending outward, feeling the unfamiliar spiritual pressure permeating this realm. Soul Oshiti operated on fundamentally different principles than either the shinobi world or the magical dimensions they had visited. Here, reishi, spiritual particles, formed the very foundation of existence. And souls manifested physical bodies through their spiritual pressure alone. Something's wrong, he murmured, golden rings appearing around his eyes as he activated a subtle form of sage mode. Balance in this dimension is already disturbed. Vados nodded, her staff glowing faintly. The breach hasn't fully formed yet, but the dimensional fabric is thinning rapidly. Soul Society exists as a nexus between multiple planes of existence, the living world, Hueco Mundo, and others. This makes it particularly vulnerable to Vortis's influence. What exactly are we looking for? Marioliona demanded, her practical nature asserting itself. Another construct like the one in my world. Unlikely, Vados replied. Vortis adapts his methods to each dimension's unique properties. In a realm NTERED around spiritual pressure and soul-bonded weapons, he would use something that corrupts or hijacks those specific energies. Ghislaine stepped forward, her massive sword shifting slightly on back as though responding to the spiritual atmosphere. We should establish a secure location before making ourselves known. This world has its own defenders who might not welcome interdimensional visitors. Naruto raised an eyebrow at her tactical suggestion. Throughout their journey to seal the previous breaches, the Sword King had fought with unquestioning courage but rarely contributed to strategic planning. This shift suggested she was becoming more invested in their mission beyond simply protecting her own world. Good thinking, he acknowledged. Vados, can you mask our presence own detection while we gather information? The angel nodded, tracing a complex pattern in the air with her staff. I can dampen our energy signatures temporarily, though individuals with exceptional Spiritual awareness may still sense something unusual. As Vados established their concealment, Naruto created a shadow clone, its form instantly adapting to resemble a local Soul Reaper. I'll send this to Scout Seraite. The clone's connection will allow me to gather information without alerting the authorities. The disguised clone departed swiftly, leaving the group to observe from their elevated position. As they waited, Ghislaine studied Naruto with increasing intensity, her feline eyes narrowed in assessment. Your abilities continue to expand, she finally stated, breaking the silence. Each dimension we visit, your powers adapt and incorporate new aspects. Naruto met her gaze evenly. My divine consciousness is awakening gradually. With each breach we seal, more of Ryujin's memories and abilities become accessible. And yet you maintain your human identity, she observed. Most beings would be overwhelmed by such power, losing themselves to divine consciousness. Perhaps that's why Ryujin chose him specifically, Marioliona interjected, her sharp mind drawing connections. A vessel with the willpower to maintain individuality even when housing a god. Vados smiled slightly. Perceptive, Captain Vermilion. The incarnation process isn't random. Dragon gods select vessels with specific qualities needed for their purpose. Ghislaine's tail swished thoughtfully as she processed this information. Then, with characteristic directness, she declared, I wish to test your combat abilities. The group fell silent, surprised by her sudden challenge. Now, Marioliona asked incredulously, we're in an unfamiliar dimension with a breach forming, and you want to spar? Ghislaine remained unmoved. Precisely because we face escalating threats. I need to understand the full extent of his capabilities if we're to fight effectively as a unit. She turned back to Naruto, her gaze unwavering. You claim divine power, yet I've only seen fragments of your true abilities. How can I trust my life, or the fate of my world, to someone whose limits I don't comprehend? Instead of taking offense, Naruto considered her reasoning with respect. The Sword King's Chalang. He wasn't born of arrogance but pragmatism. A warrior's need to understand her ally's strengths and weaknesses before entering battle. She's right, he acknowledged, surprising Marioliona. If we're going to function as a team, you should all understand what I'm capable of. He glanced at Vados. Can you create a pocket dimension for us? Somewhere we can spar without affecting this realm or revealing our presence. The angel nodded. A prudent request. I can establish a temporary training space between dimensions, a bubble reality that will contain your energies while maintaining our connection to Soul Society. With a complex series of motions, Vados traced her staff through the air, creating an expanding circle of light that enveloped them completely. When the light faded, they stood in what appeared to be an endless plain beneath a twilight sky, neither day nor night but something in between. This space exists outside normal dimensionality, Vados explained. Time flows differently here. Hours can pass while only minutes elapse in Soul Society. You may exercise your full abilities without concern for collateral damage. Ghislaine immediately removed her massive sword from its back harness, the blade gleaming with an inner light that responded to the unique energies of the pocket dimension. No restraints, she stated firmly. I need to see what you're truly capable of. Naruto nodded, rolling his shoulders as he stepped into the center of the plane. Agreed. But remember, this isn't a battle to defeat each other. It's an exchange of knowledge. Marioliona moved to stand beside Vados at a safe distance, her eyes gleaming with professional interest. This should be educational, she murmured, flames dancing between her fingertips in unconscious response to her excitement. Ghislaine didn't waste time on further words. With explosive speed that belied her muscular frame, she launched herself at Naruto, her massive sword moving with impossible grace. The attack aimed not as a wild swing but as a precisely calculated strike aimed at testing his reflexes rather than causing injury. Naruto didn't dodge or block. Instead, he simply wasn't there when the blade arrived. Having moved with such speed that even Ghislaine's experienced eyes struggled to track him. He reappeared behind her, not attacking but observing her recovery. The Sword King responded without hesitation, pivoting in a fluid motion that transformed her forward momentum into a horizontal slice that would have bisected a normal opponent. Again, Naruto evaded with minimal movement, his body flowing like water around the lethal edge. Impressive speed, Ghislaine acknowledged, her tactical assessment continuing even as she attacked. But I've yet to see you strike. Defense alone wins no battles. In response, Naruto finally moved offensively, not with overwhelming force but with a single palm strike that contained precisely calculated power. Ghislaine brought her sword up to block, but the impact still sent her skidding backward several meters, her clawed feet digging furrows in the ground. Your physical strength exceeds what your frame suggests, she noted, genuine appreciation in her voice. A common trait among truly dangerous opponents. What followed was not so much a battle as an escalating conversation expressed through combat. Ghislaine systematically employed different sword techniques from her vast repertoire, each designed to test a specific aspect of combat prowess: speed, strength, tactical awareness, adaptability. Naruto responded in kind, gradually revealing more of his capabilities while still holding his true power in reserve. He demonstrated taijutsu sequences that flowed with inhuman precision, shadow clones that executed complex coordinated attacks, and manipulations of chakra that defied the physical limitations Ghislaine was accustomed to. From the sidelines, Marioliona watched with growing fascination, her experienced eye recognizing the high-level exchange occurring beneath the surface spectacle. They're not just fighting, she observed quietly. They're communicating. Vados nodded. The Sword King comes from a culture where combat is their primary language. By trading techniques rather than words, they establish understanding that transcends verbal limitations. The sparring continued to escalate, Ghislaine now incorporating mana into her attacks, her blade glowing with power as she unleashed techniques from the North God style. 7 sequential strikes of sundering, she called, her sword becoming a blur as she executed. A combination so fast it appeared as a single movement. Naruto met the onslaught with a technique of his own, golden energy swirling around his hands as he created multiple Rasengan variants simultaneously. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. The techniques collided with Ghislaine's sword strikes, creating shockwaves that rippled throughout the pocket dimension. For nearly an hour, they continued this exchange, neither seeking victory but both pushing the other to reveal more of their capabilities. Gradually, Ghislaine began incorporating techniques from other god styles beyond her primary North God affiliation, adaptations and variations developed through her long years of combat experience. Naruto responded by revealing more of his shinobi arsenal, summoning techniques, advanced nature transformations, and finally, aspects of his 6 paths power that had begun reawakening alongside his divine consciousness. Eventually, Ghislaine paused, her breathing heavy but controlled, sweat glistening on her feline features. You continue to hold back, she stated, not accusingly but with certainty. As do you, Naruto replied with a knowing smile. Neither of us has approached our limits. The Sword King considered this, then made a decision. Planting her massive blade in the ground, she closed her eyes and began concentrating her mana in a way she hadn't previously demonstrated. The air around her shimmered as her power condensed, her muscular form becoming surrounded by a swirling aura that resembled a bestial phantom. Sword God style. Ultimate technique. Divine beast manifestation, she intoned, her voice deeper and resonant with power. The phantom aura solidified, taking the form of a massive spectral lion that surrounded Ghislaine completely, its size dwarfing her already impressive frame. This was no mere energy construct but a manifestation of her true power, the ultimate technique of someone who had mastered multiple god styles and synthesized them into something uniquely her own. Now, she declared through the phantom beast's maw, show me what the dragon god is truly capable of. Naruto straightened, genuine respect in his expression. What Ghislaine had revealed wasn't just a combat technique but a deeply personal expression of her life's devotion to swordsmanship. By showing him this form, she was offering trust beyond words. Very well, he replied quietly. Closing his eyes, Naruto allowed more of his divine consciousness to surface. Golden scales appeared across his skin, glowing with inner light as his features sharpened, becoming more angular and less human. 6 glowing orbs materialized behind him, each containing a different elemental energy, while his eyes transformed completely, horizontal pupils within concentric golden rings that seemed to see through reality itself. Ultra Sage Instinct, he named the transformation, his voice carrying harmonic undertones that resonated on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The convergence of Rai, Ujin's divine nature with my shinobi techniques and natural energy manipulation. Even Vados appeared impressed by this manifestation. He's accessing more of his divine heritage than I anticipated at this stage, she murmured. The sealing of multiple breaches has accelerated his awakening. Marioliona leaned forward, flames unconsciously flaring around her in response to the tremendous power she was witnessing. Is that dangerous? Not yet, Vados replied carefully. As long as his human consciousness remains dominant. In the center of the plane, Ghislaine's bestial avatar roared a challenge that Naruto answered with a pulse of divine ki so controlled it disturbed not a single blade of grass despite its immense power. The Sword King charged, her phantom beast moving with impossible speed for something so massive. Claws and fangs of concentrated mana leading her attack. Naruto didn't evade this time. Instead, he met her charge directly, divine energy flowing through his move. Mence as he engaged her avatar in close combat. Each strike contained perfectly calculated force, enough to test her limits without causing harm, demonstrating mastery beyond mere power. What followed transcended ordinary combat. The Sword King's bestial avatar attacked with combinations that incorporated techniques from all known god styles of her world, while Naruto responded with movements that seemed to bend the fundamental laws of reality. The 6 orbs floating behind him occasionally contributed elemental effects that countered or complemented Ghislaine's mana constructs, creating spectacular visual displays as their powers interacted. From the sidelines, Marioliona watched with something approaching awe, her warrior's heart recognizing the extraordinary nature of what she was witnessing. This isn't just combat, she whispered. It's art. Indeed, Vados agreed. They've moved beyond testing to genuine exchange, sharing the essence of their fighting philosophies rather than merely their techniques. The sparring reached its climax when Ghislaine channeled all her remaining energy into a single overwhelming attack, her bestial avatar condensing into her blade as she executed a strike of such perfect form it seemed to distort space itself. North's sword water god combined ultimate, reality dividing edge. She roared, her sword becoming a line of pure white light as it descended. Naruto met the attack not with a counter technique but with his open palm, divine energy swirling around his hand in a protective vortex. The collision of energies created a momentary silence. Before a thunderous boom echoed throughout the pocket dimension, reality itself shuddering from the impact. When the light faded, they stood frozen in the aftermath. Ghislaine's sword halted against Naruto's palm, neither having yielded or overpowered the other. Perfect balance. For several heartbeats, they maintained this position, a tableau of mutual respect expressed through combat. Then, with synchronized exhales, both released their enhanced states, returning to their normal forms as the tremendous energies they had wielded dissipated harmlessly into the dimensional fabric around them. Ghislaine stepped back, sheathing her sword with a fluid motion that showed no hint of the exertion she had just undergone. Her expression, normally stern and reserved, held something new, a profound satisfaction that went beyond the physical challenge. I understand now, she stated simply. Naruto nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. Through combat, they had established a connection and mutual comprehension that would have taken months of conversation to achieve. Your technique at the end, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Combining 3 god styles simultaneously, I've never seen anything like it. Pride flashed briefly in Ghislaine's eyes. Few have mastered even one god style completely. Fewer still have attempted to synthesize their principles. She studied him with renewed assessment. But you adapted to counter it instantly, despite never having encountered such a technique before. The Ultra Sage instinct allows me to perceive energy flows on a fundamental level, Naruto explained. I could see the structure of your technique as it formed and respond accordingly. Marioliona approached, flames still dancing excitedly around her clenched fists. That was enlightening, she admitted, her usual brusqueness tempered by genuine respect. Both of you possess abilities beyond anything in the Clover Kingdom. Vados dismissed the pocket dimension with a graceful gesture, reality folding around them as they returned to their original location overlooking Soul Society. The exchange was informative, but we must return to our mission, she reminded them. The dimensional breach continues to develop. As if summoned by her words, Naruto's shadow clone dispelled itself, sending a rush of gathered information back to him. His expression grew serious. He processed what the clone had discovered. There's a situation developing in the center of Seraite, he reported. The Soul Reapers are investigating anomalies in their precipice world, the Dime. Encional boundary between Soul Society and the living realm. Several of their strongest fighters have disappeared while investigating. Vortis's influence is already at work, Vados concluded grimly. We must intervene before the breach fully forms. Ghislaine adjusted her sword harness, her manner now all business. How do we approach? If their forces are already mobilized, they'll be suspicious of unknown entities entering their territory. Especially powerful ones, Marioliona added, having quickly grasped the hierarchical nature of Soul Society from their observations. This realm seems to value strength and authority even more than the Clover Kingdom. Naruto considered their options, drawing on both his tactical experience as Hokage and the gradually awakening memories of Ryujin. We need to make contact with their leadership directly, someone with both the authority to act and the wisdom to listen. The Captain Commander, Vados suggested. Genryusai Yamamoto leads the T.R. court guard squads that defend this realm. His experience spans thousands of years. Someone that old might recognize signs of the dragon gods, Naruto mused. If memories of Ryujin exist in this dimension, they would be preserved by its oldest inhabitants. Decision made, the group began moving toward Seraite, maintaining their concealment as they navigated the outskirts of the Soul Society. Rather than entering through conventional means, Vados guided them along dimensional fault lines invisible to normal perception, places where reality was slightly thinner and more permeable. As they traveled, Ghislaine fell into step beside Naruto, her manner more relaxed than before their sparring session yet still professionally vigilant. Your divine power, she began, keeping her voice low, it feels familiar somehow. During our combat, when you fully manifested the Ultra Sage instinct, I experienced a sense of recognition I cannot explain. Naruto glanced at her with interest. What kind of recognition? The Sword King frowned, struggling to articulate something that existed at the edge of her consciousness. Like remembering something I never actually experienced. My bees. Chi form resonated with your energy in a way that transcended our current acquaintance. Vados, overhearing their conversation, offered an explanation. The dragon gods existed across all dimensions simultaneously. Their influence touched countless worlds, including yours, Sword King. The god styles you've mastered, North, Sword, Water, these techniques may have originated from encounters with divine beings in your world's ancient past. Are you suggesting my sword techniques derive from dragon gods? Ghislaine asked skeptically. Not directly, Vados clarified. But the fundamental principles, the understanding of how energy flows through different forms and expressions, those concepts often filtered down through generations, their origins forgotten but their essence preserved. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. It would explain why your ultimate technique felt structurally similar to certain divine manifestations in Ryujin's memories. Different expressions of the same fundamental principles. Ghislaine absorbed this information with characteristic stoicism, though her tail twitched in what might have been agitation or excitement. The idea that her lifelong dedication to swordsmanship might connect to something beyond her world's understanding was clearly affecting her more than she wanted to admit. This connection, she finally asked, could it be useful in our current mission? Potentially, Naruto acknowledged. If your techniques derive from similar energetic principles as divine ki, they might be particularly effective against Vortis's constructs. Further discussion was interrupted as they reached the outer walls of Seraite, massive structures of Seiki stone designed to block spiritual pressure and prevent unauthorized entry. Beyond these fortifications lay the administrative center of Soul Society, where the breach was most likely forming. We need to locate the Precipice World access point, Naruto stated, his senses extended to detect dimensional disturbances. That's where the Soul Reapers reported their people vanishing. Vados pointed toward the center of Seraite, where a massive tower rose above the surrounding buildings. The Department of Research and Development maintains the primary access point to the Precipice World. If Vortis is attempting to create a breach, that would be his target. Then that's where we head, Marioliona declared. Flames already gathering around her fists in anticipation. Caution, Ghislaine advised, her tactical mind assessing the situation. We should approach carefully rather than charging in. This EALM has different protocols and hierarchies than ours. Naruto nodded in agreement. I'll send another clone ahead, this time disguised as a civilian rather than a Soul Reaper. Less likely to trigger immediate suspicion. As the clone departed on its reconnaissance mission, the group established a temporary position on the outskirts of Seraite, concealed from normal detection by Vados' abilities. While they waited, Naruto focused on refining his control of the Ultra Sage instinct, meditating quietly as golden energy occasionally rippled across his skin. Ghislaine observed this practice with professional interest before finally speaking. Your transformation during our sparring, the Ultra Sage instinct. It's not complete, is it? Naruto opened eyes that briefly flashed with vertical pupils before returning to normal. No, what you saw was perhaps 30% of Ryujin's full divine manifestation. My human form can't yet channel more without risk. Risk of what? Marioliona asked, her natural curiosity overcoming her usual brusqueness. Losing myself, Naruto replied simply. Divine consciousness operates on multiple dimensions simultaneously. The human mind isn't designed to process that level of awareness all at once. Hence the gradual awakening, Vados added. Each breach we seal, each dimension we visit, allows more of Ryujin's consciousness to integrate with Naruto's identity in a sustainable way. Ghislaine considered this with narrowed eyes. And if this integration were to happen too quickly, then Naruto Uzumaki would cease to exist as an individual, Vados stated bluntly. His human consciousness would be subsumed by Ryujin's divine awareness. An uncomfortable silence followed this revelation, broken finally by Marioliona's characteristic directness. Then we ensure that doesn't happen, she declared, as though the matter were settled by her declaration alone. The multiverse needs Naruto Uzumaki's human perspective as much as Ryujin's divine power. The simple confidence in her statement brought a smile to Naruto's face. Thank you for that, Captain Vermilion. Their conversation was interrupted by the return of Naruto's shadow clone, dispelling itself to transfer its gathered intelligence. His expression grew serious as he processed the information. The situation is worse than we thought, he reported. The research department has been experimenting with something they call the Okayan Catalyst, a device meant to create temporary passages between dimensional boundaries. According to my clone's observations, they discover it in ruins predating Soul Society's establishment. An artifact from the age of dragon gods, Vados deduced immediately. Such devices were created to maintain balance between dimensions, not force connections. The Soul Reapers don't understand its true purpose, Naruto continued. They've been activating it periodically, creating stable passages to the precipice world. But their latest activation went wrong. The catalyst began drawing power from multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating the instability we detected. Ghislaine's expression darkened. Vortis must have influenced them somehow, guiding their experiments toward breaching rather than stable connection. Precisely, Naruto confirmed, and now several of their strongest fighters are trapped in a space between dimensions, neither in the precipice world nor in Soul Society proper. Then we have two objectives, Marioliona summarized. Seal the developing breach and rescue these Soul Reapers before the dimensional collapse destroys them. 3 objectives, Ghislaine corrected. We must also secure this Okayan Catalyst. If it truly dates from the age of dragon gods, leaving it in untrained hands invites further disaster. Naruto nodded in agreement. The catalyst is our priority. Properly used, it might actually help us track Vortis's movements across dimensions. With their objectives clarified, the group abandoned their concealment, moving openly toward Seraite's center. As expected, their presence was quickly detected, alarm bells ringing throughout the court of pure souls as Soul Reapers mobilized to intercept the unknown intruders. The first response came from a group of black-robed figures who surrounded them with drawn swords, spiritual pressure radiating from them in waves that would have intimidated ordinary beings. "Halt and identify yourselves," commanded their leader, a bald man with red markings at the corners of his eyes. "You are trespassing in Seraite." Naruto stepped forward, his manner calm but authoritative. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, incarnation of Ryujin, the dragon god of balance. We've come regarding the disturbance in your precipice world and the missing Soul Reapers." The declaration caused visible confusion among their interceptors, with several exchanging uncertain glances. Their leader, however, remained skeptical. Dragon God. Never heard of such a thing, he retorted. His zanpakuto still pointed threateningly. And how do you know about our internal affairs? The dimensional instability affects multiple realities, not just Soul Society, Naruto explained patiently. We're here to help, not threaten. Take us to your Captain Commander, and we can resolve this situation before it deteriorates further. Before the standoff could escalate, a new spiritual pressure descended upon them, ancient and immense, like the weight of a sun compressed into humanoid form. The Soul Reapers immediately dropped to one knee as an elderly figure approached. Supported by a wooden staff but radiating power that belied his apparent age. Captain Commander Yamamoto, the bald Soul Reaper acknowledged, head bowed respectfully. The ancient Soul Reaper eyed the group with eyes that had witnessed millennia of conflict, his gaze lingering particularly on Naruto and Vados. Dragon God of Balance, he repeated, his voice deep and rumbling like distant thunder. That name has not been spoken in Soul Society for 10,000 years. Surprise flickered across Naruto's features. Then you've heard of Ryujin. Yamamoto's weathered face revealed nothing. But his spiritual pressure shifted subtly. Follow me. This discussion is not for public hearing. Without waiting for a response, he turned and moved toward the central administrative building with surprising speed for his apparent age. The group followed, escorted by a contingent of Soul Reapers who maintained a respectful distance while remaining vigilantly alert. They were led to a spacio's chamber dominated by a massive desk and adorned with ancient weapons and scrolls. Once the doors closed behind them, Yamamoto turned to face his unusual visitors. In the oldest records of Soul Society, before the formation of the 13 court guard squads, there are mentions of beings who maintained balance between dimensions, he stated without preamble. Entities neither Hollow nor Soul Reaper, who appeared during times of great crisis when the boundaries between worlds threatened to collapse. The Dragon Gods, Vados confirmed, of which Ryujin was one of the most prominent, the Guardian of dimensional integrity and balance. Yamamoto studied Naruto with piercing intensity. You claim to be this ancient entity incarnated in human form. Prove it. Rather than taking offense at the demand, Naruto closed his eyes briefly, allowing a measured portion of his divine consciousness to surface. Golden scales appeared across his skin as the air around him shimmered with power that transcended spiritual pressure. Operating on principles more fundamental than Soul Society's established energies. The divine key of Dragon Gods exists beyond the cycle of souls you maintain, Naruto explained. His voice resonating with harmonic undertones. It is neither spiritual pressure nor hollow energy, but something more primordial, the foundation upon which multiple realities were constructed. Yamamoto's expression remained impassive, though a flicker of recognition passed through his ancient eyes. After a moment of consideration, he spoke a single word in a language none of them recognized, a sound more felt than heard. Vibrating through reality itself rather than merely through the air. To everyone's surprise, Naruto responded automatically in the same tongue, the knowledge Raizen. Ji from Ryujin's awakening memories without conscious effort. The exchange lasted only seconds, but when it concluded, Yamamoto's demeanor had shifted subtly from skepticism to grim acknowledgement. So it is true, the ancient Soul Reaper murmured. The dimensional barriers are failing again, as they did before the Great Separation. You know of the original convergence? Vados asked, genuine surprise in her voice. Yamamoto moved to a cabinet behind his desk, retrieving a scroll so old its edges crumbled despite careful handling. Soul Society exists in a unique position between dimensions. Our precipice world, the boundary space, contains echoes of events that shaped reality itself. He unrolled the scroll carefully, revealing diagrams and text in a script none of them recognized except Naruto and Vados. The illustrations depicted draconic entities manipulating energies that flowed between different realms, with one central figure that unmistakably resembled Naruto's divine form. Quote, this document was recovered from the ruins where the research department found the catalyst you mentioned, Yamamoto explained. For centuries, we believed it merely mythological, symbolism rather than historical record. Naruto studied the ancient text, Ryujin's memories providing partial translation. This describes the original separation of dimensions, he confirmed. When the unified reality became too unstable to maintain cohesion, the dragon gods implemented a controlled division into compatible dimensional groups. And now someone seeks to reverse that process, Yamamoto concluded grimly. Captain Kuretsuchi reported anomalous readings from the Okayan catalyst shortly before communication was lost. The precipice world has become unstable, shifting unpredictably between different dimensional coordinates. Ghislaine stepped forward, her tactical mind focused on immediate concerns. The missing Soul Reapers, how many, and what were their capabilities? 3 captains and their lieutenants, Yamamoto replied. Byakuya Kuchiki, Toshiro Hitsugaya, and Mayuri Kuretsuchi, along with Lieutenants Renji Abarai, Rangaku Matsumoto, and Nemu Kuretsuchi. Some of our strongest fighters. Deliberately trapped, Marioliona deduced, her flames flickering with agitation. Removing potential opposition before the breach fully forms. Naruto nodded in agreement. Vados is learning from our previous interventions. He's neutralizing each dimension's defenders before we can form alliances with them. Then we must act quickly, Yamamoto declared, retrieving his staff. I will accompany you to the research department. The catalyst must be stabilized before the breach becomes irreversible. As they prepared to depart, a tremendous spiritual pressure suddenly washed over them, wild and chaotic. Unlike the disciplined energy of Soul Reapers, a black-haired woman in an orange jacket burst into the chamber without ceremony, her golden eyes narrowed with suspicion. Old Man Yama, she called casually. Ignoring all protocol, who are these outsiders, and why do they reek of energy that doesn't belong in any world I know? Yamamoto sighed almost imperceptibly. Yoruichi Shihoin, former captain of the 2nd Division in Onmitsukido. Your timing is either fortuitous or troublesome, depending on one's perspective. The woman grinned, unrepentant. I felt the disturbances from the world of the living. Kazuki sent me to investigate while he works on his end. Her gaze swept over the group, lingering particularly on Naruto with feline intensity. Interesting company you're keeping these days. They claim knowledge that may help resolve the current crisis, Yamamoto stated evenly. We were just departing for the research department to address the situation with the Okayan catalyst. Yoruichi's playful demeanor vanished instantly. The catalyst is active again. After what happened last time, she turned serious eyes toward Naruto. Whatever you think you know about dimensional boundaries, the catalyst isn't something to approach lightly. It nearly collapsed 3 worlds during its last activation. We're aware of its power, Naruto assured her. And its true purpose. The catalyst wasn't meant to breach dimensions but to maintain balance between them. It's being misused, either deliberately or through ignorance. Yoruichi studied him with new interest, her spiritual pressure probing subtly at his unusual energy signature. You're not a Soul Reaper, Hollow, Quincy, or any other type one recognize. What exactly are you? Before Naruto could respond, the building shook violently. Spiritual particles in the air vibrating as reality itself seemed to fluctuate around them. Through the windows, they could see a pillar of light erupting from the direction of the research department. Its color cycling through impossible spectra as it tore into the sky above Seraite. The breach has begun, Vados announced grimly. We must hurry. Without further discussion, the expanded group moved with flash step speed toward the source of the disturbance, Yoruichi effortlessly keeping pace despite having received no formal briefing on the situation. Her adaptability, and immediate focus on the threat rather than jurisdictional questions impressed Ghislaine, who recognized a kindred tactical mind. As they approached the research department, the dimensional distortion became physically apparent. Buildings and streets wavering like mirages, spiritual particles dispersing and reforming in unnatural patterns. Soul Reapers who had been too close to the epicenter appeared frozen in temporal stasis. Neither alive nor dead but suspended between states of existence. The department itself had transformed into something architecturally impossible, its structure tending inward and outward simultaneously, corridors leading both nowhere and everywhere as reality folded upon itself. At its center, visible through distorted space, glowed a crystalline object the size of a small boulder, the Okayan catalyst, now pulsing with energies it was never meant to channel. The catalyst has been modified, Vados observed, her ancient eyes perceiving details others missed. Someone has inverted its regulatory matrices, turning a device meant to strengthen boundaries into one that dissolves them. Kuretsuchi, Yoruichi spat, That mad scientist probably thought he was making some grand discovery. No, Naruto countered, his divine consciousness analyzing the energy patterns. This modification required knowledge beyond any modern understanding. The changes are too precise, too fundamentally aligned with dimensional constants that aren't even known in this reality. Vados, Ghislaine concluded grimly. He influenced their research somehow, guiding them toward this outcome. Yamamoto's spiritual pressure intensified, flames beginning to flicker around his staff. How do we stop it? I need to reach the catalyst directly, Naruto replied. With physical contact, I can reverse the modifications and use the device for its intended purpose, reinforcing boundaries rather than dissolving them. Mereoleona surveyed the spatial distortions surrounding the building. The approach won't be straightforward. Reality itself is becoming unreliable near the epicenter. I can navigate dimensional irregularities, Yoruichi offered unexpectedly. My Flash Street EP technique allows perception and movement between fractional spaces. I could guide him through. Ghislaine's ears twitched with interest at this revelation. You've had previous experience with dimensional anomalies. The former captain shrugged with deceptive casualness. Kazuki's experiments occasionally have unintended consequences. You adapt or you disappear. Then you'll take point with Naruto, Yamamoto decided. The rest of us will create a perimeter and prevent anything from interfering with the stabilization process. As they prepared to implement this plan, a new complicity emerged. From the spatial distortions around the catalyst appeared several figures, their forms flickering between solid and translucent as they struggled against dimensional currents. These were the missing Soul Reapers. But something was clearly wrong. Their spiritual signatures are corrupted, Yoruichi warned, her golden eyes narrowing. Something's interfering with their soul composition. Yamamoto's ancient gaze hardened. Vados is using them as anchors, living connections to Soul Society's fundamental structure. Can they be saved? Mereoleona demanded, her straightforward nature focusing on the practical question. If we stabilize the catalyst, yes, Naruto confirmed. But they may resist our efforts while under Vados's influence. Ghislaine unsheathed her massive sword, resolution evident in her stance. Then we'll neutralize them without causing permanent harm. Captain Vermilion and I can handle this task while you focus on the catalyst. Mereoleona nodded in agreement, flames already forming complex patterns around her hands. Non-lethal containment is well within my capabilities. With roles established, the group moved into action with coordinated precision. That belied their recently formed alliance. Ghislaine and Mereoleona positioned themselves to intercept the corrupted Soul Reapers, while Vados and Yamamoto established a perimeter of combined Angeli. Sea and spiritual energy to stabilize the immediate area against further deterioration. Naruto and Yoruichi approached the dimensional distortions surrounding the research department, the former Captai. En's eyes gleaming with concentration as she analyzed the spatial irregularities. The structure still exists in normal space-time at a fundamental level, she explained, but overlaid with multiple dimensional variants. We need to navigate the intersections where realities align momentarily. Naruto nodded, his divine senses already detecting the patterns she described. I see them. Nexus points. Where dimensional fluctuations briefly stabilize. Yoruichi shot him a surprised glance. You can perceive dimensional currents without specialized equipment. Part of my heritage, Naruto replied simply. The former captain studied him with new appreciation before refocusing on their task. Follow my exact movements. Deviate by even a centimeter, and you could end up scattered across multiple dimensions. With that warning, she launched into motion. Not merely the high-speed movement of Flash Step, but something more complex that seemed to weave between layers of reality itself. Naruto followed, his divine consciousness allowing him to perceive and replicate her precise trajectory through the dimensional maze. Meanwhile, Ghislaine and Mereoleona engaged the corrupted Soul Reapers, Air diverse combat styles proving surprisingly complementary. The Sword King's precise, economical movements contrasted with the Fire Captain's wild, overwhelming assaults, creating a balanced approach that kept their opponents constantly adapting. The white-haired one controls ice, Ghislaine called out, her sword deflecting a barrage of ice daggers with minimal movement. His techniques resem BLE water god style with crystalline properties. Mereoleona responded instantly to this tactical assessment, her flames intensifying to counter the ice user's abilities. The noble-looking one manip. Ulit's blade fragments, thousands of them simultaneously. Watch your blind spots. Together, they implemented a containment strategy rather than seeking to defeat the powerful Soul Reapers, using their respective abilities to limit movement and options rather than inflict damage. Ghislaine's sword techniques created boundaries of compressed mana that redirected rather than blocked, while Mereoliona's flames formed cages of variable intensity that restricted without burning. As they fought, Naruto and Yoruichi penetrated deeper into the dimensionally distorted research department, navigating PA's ages that obeyed no consistent physical laws. Corridors ended in walls that weren't truly there, stairs led simultaneously up and down, and doorways opened onto views of multiple realities superimposed upon each other. The catalyst's influence is growing stronger, Yoruichi observed, her voice tight with concentration. Reality is becoming increasingly malleable near the epicenter. Naruto nodded, golden scales beginning to appear across his skin as his divine consciousness responded to the dimensional chaos. The Okayan catalyst was designed to harmonize dimensional boundaries, not dissolve them. It's fighting against its own corrupted programming. After what seemed like hours but might have been minutes in the distorted time-space, they finally reached the central chamber where the catalyst floated suspended in a matrix of energy that cycled through impossible colors. The device itself appeared deceptively simple, a crystalline sphere with intricate patterns etched into its surface, pulsing with power that transcended normal spiritual energy. Surrounding it were complex mechanical apparatus of Soul Reaper design, clearly Kuretsuchi's additions intended to control and direct the catalyst's power. These modifications glowed with an unnatural purple light that didn't belong in Soul Society's color spectrum. Vortis's corruption, Naruto identified immediately. He's turned their control system into a conduit for his influence. Yoruichi assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. Can you separate the catalyst from those machines? They seem to be forcing it to operate against its nature. Yes, but the process will trigger a dimensional shockwave, Naruto warned. You should return to the others before I begin. The former captain raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by his concern. I've survived worse than dimensional hiccups. Besides, someone needs to watch your back in case more of those corrupted Soul Reapers appear. Recognizing the futility of arguing with her resolved expression, Naruto nodded and approached the suspended catalyst. As he drew closer, the golden scales on his skin became more pronounced, resonating with the ancient device's original purpose. The catalyst recognizes Ryujin's energy signature, he realized aloud. It was likely created during the original dimensional separation. Yoruichi positioned herself near the chamber entrance, ready to intercept any threats. Just do what you need to do. I can feel this whole place becoming more unstable by the second. Nodding, Naruto extended his hands toward the catalyst, divine ki flowing from his palms in golden streams that enveloped the crystalline sphere. The moment his energy made contact, the patterns etched into the catalyst's surface illuminated with answering light. Resonating with his divine signature, a voice that wasn't quite sound echoed in Naruto's consciousness, the catalyst's programming responding to the presence of its creator's energy after eons of dormancy. Protocol: dimensional stabilization. Error: current configuration incompatible with primary function. External corruption detected. Requesting authorization for system reset. Asterisk. Authorization granted, Naruto replied. Allowing more of Ryujin's consciousness to surface temporarily. Revert to original parameters and purge all unauthorized modifications. The catalyst pulsed with renewed energy. The purple corruption in the surrounding machinery beginning to recede as golden light spread throughout the systems. However, the process triggered immediate resistance. The machines Kuretsuchi had built began to spark and overheat, fighting against the catalyst's restoration. Something's wrong, Yoruichi called from her position. The spiritual pressure outside is going haywire. Whatever you're doing is being countered. Naruto's divine senses extended beyond the chamber, perceiving what she had noticed. Vados is fighting through his corrupted anchors, using the soul ray. Hers connection to this dimension to maintain his influence. Outside, Ghislaine and Mereoliona found their containment strategy suddenly inadequate as the corrupted Soul Reapers manifested new abilities beyond their normal capabilities. Purple energy reminiscent of Vortis's signature began flowing through the captains and lieutenants, their Zanpakuto transforming into twisted versions of themselves. They're drawing power directly from the dimensional breach, Ghislaine realized, her sword barely deflecting a barrage of cherry blossom blades that moved with unnatural precision. Fighting defensively is no longer viable. Mereoleona had already reached the same conclusion, her flames shifting from containment patterns to more aggressive formations. We need to sever Vortis's connection to them completely. Full incapacitation, not just containment. With this new strategy, they coordinated a more decisive assault. Mereoleona unleashed her most powerful fire technique, a roaring lion, of pure flame that engulfed the ice-wielding captain completely, not burning him but consuming the oxygen around him so completely that consciousness fled before damage could occur. Simultaneously, Ghislaine executed a perfect North God technique that targeted not the noble captain himself but the connection between him and his scattered blade fragments. With a single precise strike, she disrupted the spiritual link, causing the fragments to fall harmlessly to the ground as their wielder collapsed, the purple energy flickering and fading from his unconscious form. Back in the central chamber, Naruto felt the change immediately as two of Vortis's anchors were neutralized. The catalyst's restoration accelerated, golden light overtaking more of the corrupted systems as the ancient device recalibrated itself to its original purpose. Asterisk reconfiguration 60% complete. Warning. Dimensional instability approaching critical threshold. Breach collapse imminent. Asterisk. We're running out of time, Naruto called to Yoruichi. The breach is becoming unstable. When it collapses, it could take half of Soul Society with it unless the catalyst is fully restored and properly calibrated. The former captain abandoned her guard position, moving to his side with determined focus. What do you need? An additional connection to Soul Society itself, he explained quickly. The catalyst needs to synchronize with this dimension's fundamental frequency to properly seal the breach. As an outsider, my connection isn't strong enough. Understanding immediately, Yoruichi placed her hands alongside his on the catalyst. I was born in Soul Society, served as a noble house leader and captain. If anyone represents this realm's essence, it's me. As her spiritual pressure flowed into the catalyst alongside Naruto's divine ki, the device's response was immediate and dramatic. The golden light intensified, patterns across its surface reconfiguring into new arrangements that aligned with Soul Society's dimensional constants. Asterisk reconfiguration 85% complete. Soul Society baseline established. Initiating dimensional reinforcement protocol. Asterisk. Outside, the effects became immediately apparent as reality began stabilizing. Spatial distortions receding as proper dimensional boundaries reasserted themselves. The remaining corrupted Soul Reapers, the research captain and the lieutenants, suddenly stumbled as Vortis's influence wavered, giving Ghislaine and Mereoleona the opening they needed to neutralize them without causing permanent harm. In the central chamber, the catalyst reached full reconfiguration, floating free of the now dormant machinery as it pulsed with harmonious golden light. Asterisk reconfiguration complete. Primary function restored. Dimensional boundary reinforcement. Initiating breach sealing sequence. Asterisk. From the catalyst erupted beams of golden energy that shot upward through the building, penetrating spatial distortions to reach the breach forming above Seraite. Unlike Naruto's previous sealing techniques that forcibly closed dimensional tiers, the catalyst's approach was more sophisticated. It rewove reality itself, restoring proper barriers while establishing controlled connection points that allowed necessary energy exchange without destructive mixing. As the breach sealed, a final pulse of purple energy manifested briefly, Vortis's influence making a last attempt to maintain the corruption. For a moment, his voice echoed through the chamber, distorted but recognizable. You cannot stop what has already begun, Ryujin. Each device you reclaim only reveals more of your divine nature to your human vessel. The awakening accelerates according to plan. The voice faded as the breach sealed completely, the catalyst's golden light stabilizing into a steady, gentle glow that indicated normal operation. Reality around them settled back into proper alignment, the research department's architecture returning to its original configuration as dimensional distortions dissipated. Yoruichi stepped back from the catalyst, studying Naruto with newfound wariness after hearing Vortis's parting message. What did he mean about your awakening? Before Naruto could respond, the others joined them in the now normalized central chamber, Ghislaine and Mereoleona escorting the recovering Soul Reapers, while Vados and Yamamoto secured the perimeter. The breach is sealed, Vados confirmed. her staff no longer glowing with containment energy, and more effectively than our previous efforts. The catalyst's specialized functions have established a stable boundary that hold resist further corruption attempts. Yamamoto approached the floating device, studying it with ancient eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless powerful artifacts. What happens to the Okayan catalyst now? It clearly possesses power beyond our full understanding. Naruto considered the question carefully, aware that his answer would establish an important precedent for how they handled such devices in future dimensions. The catalyst belongs to Soul Society, he finally stated. It was placed here deliberately during the original dimensional separation to maintain this realm's boundaries. However, he continued, it requires proper understanding to be used safely. I suggest establishing a joint guardianship, Soul Society maintaining physical possession while we provide the knowledge needed for its correct operation. Yoruichi's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Kazuki should be involved. His understanding of dimensional theory is unmatched in Soul Society. Agreed, Naruto nodded. And perhaps this collaboration could extend beyond the catalyst itself. Soul Society's position between dimensions makes it a natural ally in addressing the larger convergence crisis. Yamamoto considered this proposal with measured deliberation before inclining his head slightly. The 13 court guard squads exist to maintain balance. If this convergence threatens that balance across multiple dimensions, we have a responsibility to assist. His gaze turned to the recovering Soul Reaper captains, who were gradually returning to consciousness as Vortis's corruption faded from their spiritual pressure. However, our immediate forces are depleted. These captains will need time to recover from the dimensional corruption they experienced. I'll represent Soul Society in the meantime, Yoruichi declared unexpectedly, her golden eyes gleaming with determination and something like excitement. I've been itching for a challenge beyond the usual hollow extermination. Multidimensional crisis sounds sufficiently interesting. Ghislaine assessed the former captain with professional interest, recognizing a fellow warrior who preferred action to deliberation. Your flash step technique would be valuable in navigating dimensional distortions. And your combat abilities complement our existing team structure. Marioliona nodded in agreement, flames dancing briefly between her fingers as she sized up the potential new ally. Another close-range combat specialist would balance our tactical options. Assuming she can keep pace with us. Yoruichi's smile was both dangerous and playful. Honey, keeping pace won't be the issue. The question is whether you can keep up with me. Before this could evolve into an impromptu demonstration, Vados interrupted with characteristic practicality. The catalyst has stabilized this dimension's boundaries, but Vortis is undoubtedly preparing his next target. We should depart while the dimensional currents remain favorable. Naruto turned to Yamamoto, extending his hand in formal alliance. We'll return when possible to continue the knowledge exchange regarding the catalyst. In the meantime, monitor for any signs of renewed corruption or boundary instability. The ancient Soul Reaper clasped his arm in acknowledgement. Soul Society stands ready to assist in this multidimensional conflict. Yoruichi Shihoin will serve as our representative and communication link. Quote, with arrangements finalized, the group prepared for departure, Yoruichi joining their ranks with casual confidence that belied the significance of her decision to leave her home dimension. The catalyst remained in the research department under Yamamoto's direct supervision, its golden glow a reminder of its restored purpose. As Vados created the transport Asian sphere for their journey to the next dimension, Ghislaine approached Naruto with uncharacteristic hesitation in her normally direct manner. During our sparring, she began quietly, when you CCS the Ultra Sage instinct more fully. I sensed something that has been troubling me. Naruto turned his full attention to her, recognizing the importance of whatever had prompted this unusual uncertainty in the normally stoic Sword King. What did you sense? Limitation, she replied simply. Not in power. You possess that in abundance, but in integration. The divine consciousness in you. Our human identity remains separate in crucial ways, like oil and water momentarily forced to mix but still distinct at a fundamental level. Her assessment was surprisingly accurate, demonstrating an intuitive understanding that went beyond mere combat analysis. You're right, Naruto acknowledged. The awakening process is incomplete, and deliberately so. Full integration would risk losing my human perspective entirely. Ghislaine's tail swished thoughtfully. During our combat, I noticed moments when your techniques faltered slightly, not from lack of power but from what appeared to be internal conflict. Two approaches to the same problem competing rather than cooperating. Naruto hadn't realized his momentary hesitations had been so apparent to an outside observer. Ryujin's instincts and my own sometimes suggest different responses, he admitted. Divine perspective prioritizes cosmic balance while human experience focuses on individual impact. The Sword King considered this with professional interest. In swordsmanship, we face a similar challenge when mastering multiple god styles. Each style embodies a different philosophy of combat that can contradict the others. Mastery comes not from choosing one approach over others but from transcending the apparent contradictions to find the harmonizing principle beneath. Her insight struck Naruto with unexpected force, a perspective on his divine awakening he hadn't previously considered. You're suggesting I should seek harmony between the perspectives rather than maintaining separation. I'm suggesting, Ghislaine replied carefully, that true balance lies not in keeping different aspects of yourself segregated but in finding their natural integration point, the place where divine wisdom and human experience become complementary rather than competitive. Vados, overhearing their conversation as she completed the transportation preparations, contributed her own perspective. The Sword King raises an interesting point. The traditional assumption has been that divine consciousness would inevitably overwhelm human identity during awakening. But perhaps that's a limitation of our understanding rather than an inescapable outcome. Naruto contemplated these insights as the transportation sphere expanded to encompass their now larger group. The prospect of a more integrated awakening, one that preserved his humanity while embracing divinity rather than keeping them separate, represented a significant departure from his cautious approach thus far. As they prepared to depart for the next dimension, Ghislaine placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, a gesture of surprising familiarity from the normally reserved warrior. Consider it a different kind of challenge, she suggested, a hint of her earlier martial spirit returning. Not a battle between two aspects of yourself, but a dance seeking perfect harmony. With that thought lingering in his mind, Naruto joined the others as the transportation sphere activated, carrying them between dimensions toward their next confrontation with Vados in the expanding convergence crisis. The Sword King's challenge had evolved from a test of combat prowess to something far more profound, a challenge to his fundamental understanding of his own dual nature. As Soul Society faded around them, replaced by the swirling energies of interdimensional travel, Naruto found himself contemplating balance in an entirely new light, not as separation and limitation, but as integration and transcendence. Perhaps the greatest challenge of the Dragon God of Balance wasn't maintaining boundaries between dimensions but finding harmony amid seemingly irreconcilable differences, both within himself and throughout the multiverse. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Flames of Nobility. The interdimensional void shimmered around them, streams of reality flowing past like currents in a cosmic ocean. Unlike their previous transitions, this journey felt different, smoother, more controlled. Naruto observed the change with interest, noting how Vados guided their passage with greater precision than before. Our dimensional travel is stabilizing, he remarked, golden flecks momentarily appearing in his eyes as his divine consciousness analyzed the patterns surrounding them. The catalyst's restoration has had wider effects than just securing Soul Society. Vados nodded, her staff pulsing with gentle light as she maintained their trajectory. The Okayan catalyst was more than just a boundary reinforcement device, it was a calibration point for multiple dimensional pathways. By restoring it to its original function, we've begun rebalancing the larger network. Yoruichi, experiencing her first conscious interdimensional journey, adapted with characteristic grace, her lithe form relaxed despite the disorienting sensations. Fascinating, she murmured, golden eyes tracking energy patterns invisible to normal perception. The boundaries between dimensions aren't walls but permeable membranes with varying resistance levels. A apt observation, Vados acknowledged, impressed by the former captain's intuitive understanding. Each reality maintains its integrity through natural frequency resonance rather than absolute separation. While the others discussed dimensional mechanics, Marioliona observed the exchanges with growing impatience, flames occasionally flickering between her fingers, a physical manifestation of her restless energy. Unlike Ghislaine's measured adaptation or Yoruichi's analytical curiosity, the fire captain approached interdimensional travel with the same direct intensity she brought to combat. How much longer? She finally demanded, interrupting the theoretical discussion. If Vados is targeting another dimension, every moment spent in transit gives him additional advantage. Before Vados could respond, the void around them shifted abruptly, reality warping in patterns that shouldn't have been possible even within interdimensional space. The transportation sphere protecting them shuddered under sudden pressure as external forces attempted to disrupt their journey. Something's interfering with our trajectory, Vados announced. Her normally composed features showing concern as she reinforced their protective bubble. An external force is attempting to redirect our path. Naruto immediately extended his senses beyond their sphere. Divine awareness piercing the dimensional barriers to identify the source of the disruption. What he found sent a chill through him despite his considerable power. Vados, he confirmed grimly. He's manipulating the interdimensional currents to force us off course. Ghislaine unsheathed her massive sword despite the confined space, the blade humming with accumulated mana. Can he attack us directly while we're between dimensions? Not directly, Vados replied, her staff moving in complex patterns as she fought to maintain their intended path. But he can attempt to redirect us to a dimension of his choosing, likely one where he's prepared an ambush or trap. Mereoliona's flames intensified, her magic responding instinctively to the threat. Then we fight back. How do we counter this interference? We need to stabilize our trajectory, Naruto explained, moving to Vados' side and channeling divine ki through his palms. If we combine our energies, we can create a fixed reference point to navigate by. Yoruichi, quickly grasping the situation, offered her own solution. In the precipice world, Soul Reapers use spiritual anchors to prevent dimensional drift. I could establish something similar using my spiritual pressure. Do it, Naruto nodded, appreciating her quick thinking. Ghislaine, Mereoliona, your energies are tied to your native dimensions. Focus them allow me to create a balanced resonance pattern. Without hesitation, the group coordinated their efforts, each contributing their unique energies to counter Vados' interference. Vados maintained transportation sphere while Naruto channeled the combined power of his companions, creating a multidimensional anchor that stabilized their trajectory against the external manipulation. For several tense moments, they struggled against the opposing force, reality shifting chaotically around their protected bubble. Then, with sudden clarity, Naruto perceived Vados' true intent. He's not trying to trap us, he realized aloud. He's trying to delay us. The interference pattern isn't designed to redirect our path but to slow our transit time. Vados immediately understood the implication. Which means whatever he's planning in the target dimension is time-sensitive. We need to accelerate rather than simply stabilize. With renewed purpose, they adjusted their approach. Instead of fighting the dimensional currents, Naruto guided them to use the disruptive patterns to their advantage, creating a slipstream effect that actually increased their travel speed beyond normal parameters. The void around them blurred as their transportation sphere shot forward with unprecedented velocity, breaking through the interference pattern and emerging into their destination dimension with explosive force. Reality crystallized around them as they materialized in a world of vibrant colors and turbulent energies, a dimension where elemental magic saturated the very air. Their arrival point was a mountainous region overlooking a vast kingdom where massive structures of stone and crystal reached toward a sky painted with auroral lights despite the midday sun. Unlike the formal, organized layout of Soul Society, this realm pulsed with wild, untamed power that seemed to resonate particularly with Mereoliona, whose flames responded to the ambient magical energy. The elemental nations, she identified immediately, recognition lighting her fierce eyes. Not my specific kingdom, but the broader realm from which the Clover Kingdom evolved. Her expression shifted to one of confusion. But this isn't right. The magical density is exponentially higher than it should be. Vados studied their surroundings with ancient eyes that perceived beyond surface appearances. This dimension exists at a different point in its developmental timeline than your Clover Kingdom. What we're seeing is the primordial state of your world, before magic became regulated and categorized. The first convergence, Mereoliona breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. Our oldest texts speak of a time when elemental forces ran wild across the land, before the establishment of the magical system we know today. Naruto extended his senses, feeling the dimensional instabilities already forming in this magic-saturated environment. Vados chose this target deliberately. The raw magical energy here mocks the dimensional boundaries naturally thinner, easier to breach. Ghislaine surveyed the landscape with tactical assessment, her predatory instincts identifying defensible positions and potential threats. If this is the ancestral version of the Clover Kingdom, does that mean you have counterparts here? She asked, turning to Mereoleona. The fire captain shook her head. Not direct counterparts, but likely ancestral lineages of our current magical houses. Her expression grew serious, including the Vermilion family, known even in this era for their extraordinary fire affinity. Which makes you uniquely positioned to understand this dimension's dynamics, Naruto noted. Your connection to the magical fundamentals of this world could be crucial in identifying where Vados will attempt to establish his breach. Before Mereoleona could respond, a tremendous magical pressure washed over them, wild, untamed, and overwhelmingly powerful. From the sky above, a massive construct of pure elemental energy descended. Its form constantly shifting between various manifestations of fire, water, earth, and air. An elemental sovereign, Mereoleona identified, momentarily overtaking her usual brusqueness. Beings of pure magical essence that existed before human mages learned to channel specific elements. Our histories describe them as forces of nature rather than conscious entities. The elemental construct hovered before them, its constantly shifting form finally settling into a vaguely humanoid shape composed of swirling fire with a core of compressed magical energy visible at its center. When it spoke, the sound came not from a mouth but from the very air around them, resonating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. Ryujin, the entity acknowledged, its attention focused entirely on Naruto. The Boundary Guardian returns at last. Your absence has been problematic. Naruto stepped forward, allowing more of his divine consciousness to surface as he addressed this primordial being. You recognize me, or rather, the divine aspect I contain. You've encountered Ryujin before. The elemental being pulsed with affirmation. When the first convergence threatened to consume all realities, the dragon gods established the boundaries that separated compatible dimensions from incompatible ones. Ryujin personally calibrated the resonance frequency of this magical realm to prevent catastrophic energy bleed between elemental systems. And now those boundaries are failing again, Naruto surmised. Has Vados made contact with this dimension already? The entity's fiery form flared with what might have been agitation. The Void Speaker has corrupted several of my elemental kin, turning their natural attunement to dimensional energies toward destructive purposes. They gather at the ancient nexus, where magical ley lines converge beneath what will someday become your Clover Kingdom's capital. Mereoleona's expression hardened at this revelation. The Royal capital stands atop the most powerful magical convergence point in our world. If Vados establishes a breach there, the entire dimensional cluster connected to this world would be compromised, Vados finished grimly. Including all parallel versions of your reality across the multiverse. The elemental sovereign descended closer, its fiery form intensifying as it addressed them directly. Quote, I sensed your arrival and came to warn you. The corruption spreads rapidly among the elemental beings of this realm. Those who resist are being systematically isolated or destroyed. How long do we have before the breach fully forms? Ghislaine asked. Practical as always. Hours at most, the entity replied. The Void Speaker works through a human vessel, a mage of unprecedented power who believes the convergence will grant him dominion over all magical systems. This new information changed the tactical landscape significantly. Unlike previous breaches created through artifacts or dimensional weaknesses, this one involved a conscious collaborator with native power and knowledge. We need to identify this mage, Yoruichi stated, her analytical mind already processing strategic approaches. If he's serving as Vados's anchor in this dimension, neutralizing him could be more effective than directly attacking the forming breach. Mereoleona nodded in agreement, flames dancing between her fingers as she considered the problem. The ancient nexus would have been protected by the strongest magical practitioners of this era. Any mage powerful enough to control that site would be legendary even by contemporary standards. There is one such being, the elemental sovereign confirmed, its fiery form shifting to create an image within its flames, a tall figure wielding a staff crowned with a crystal that pulsed with multicolored light. Magus Aurelius, first archmage of the elemental conclave. His mastery extends across all elemental affinities, defying the specialization that lat. Became standard in your magical systems. Recognition flashed across Marioliona's features. Aurelius, the Vermilion family records mention him as our founding ancestor, the first human to fully bond with elemental fire. Which makes you potentially immune to certain aspects of his magic, Naruto noted, tactical mind immediately identifying the strategic advantage this connection provided. Your shared affinity might allow you to counter techniques that would overwhelm others. The elemental sovereign's form pulsed with renewed urgency. Aurelius believes the dimensional convergence will allow him to absorb the power of elemental beings from multiple realities, becoming a god in truth rather than merely in capacity. He does not understand that the convergence would ultimately destroy the very magical system he seeks to master. Classic manipulation tactic, Yoruichi observed. Vados offers targets exactly what they most desire, without revealing the true cost. Ghislaine resheathed her sword, having confirmed no immediate threats in their vicinity. How do we approach this ancient nexus? I assume it will be heavily defended. I can guide you, the sovereign offered, its fiery form condensing slightly. As a being of pure elemental energy, I can navigate the magical currents that surround the nexus without detection. But I cannot directly oppose Aurelius. His staff contains a binding crystal that subjugates elemental entities to his will. Then we'll handle Aurelius, Naruto assured the being. Your guidance to the nexus will be invaluable, but once there, remain at a safe distance to avoid being captured. With their approach decided, the group prepared to depart. The elemental sovereign transformed into a stream of fire that flowed just above the ground, guiding them across the mountainous landscape toward what would eventually become the heart of the Clover Kingdom. As they traveled, Naruto noticed Marioliona growing increasingly pensive, unusual or the normally direct and aggressive fire captain. Something's troubling you, he observed quietly, falling into step beside her. Marioliona's flames flickered briefly before she responded. Use as my ancestor, the progenitor of the magical lineage I've spent my life perfecting. In my era, he's revered as the pinnacle of what fire magic users can aspire to become. And now you might have to fight him. Naruto completed the thought, understanding her conflict. It's not that, she corrected, surprising him. I've never hesitated to challenge anyone, regardless of status or relation. It's the realization that my family's entire magical legacy might be founded on a catastrophic mistake, Aurelius's alliance with Vados. This vulnerability from the normally indomitable Captain Revia led depths to her character that her fierce exterior typically concealed. Beyond her combat prowess and aggressive confidence lay a profound sense of responsibility toward her magical heritage. Ori is rarely as straightforward as the stories we tell about it, Naruto offered. Even if Aurelius made a terrible mistake, that doesn't invalidate the generations of positive contributions your family has made since. And perhaps your presence here now, helping to correct his error, is the most fitting continuation of your lineage. Marioliona considered his words, her usually sharp features softening momentarily. Philosophical depth from the dragon god. You continue to surprise me, Uzumaki. Not from the dragon god, he clarified with a small smile. From someone who knows what it means to discover uncomfortable truths about your lineage and still forge your own path. Their conversation was interrupted as the elemental sovereign's fiery form halted at the crest of a ridge, indicating they should approach cautiously. Below them spread a vast circular valley surrounded by towering stone monoliths, each inscribed with glowing magical symbols that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. At the valley's center stood a massive crystalline structure, the ancient nexus, its faceted surface reflecting magical energies that flowed along ley lines converging from all directions. The heart of this world's magical system, the sovereign explained, its fiery form diminishing to avoid detection. What you witness now is the primordial state of magic, raw, unfiltered elemental energy before human categorization imposed artificial limitations. Around the nexus moved figures both human and elemental, mages in elaborate robes working alongside beings of pure magical essence. But something was clearly wrong with this collaboration. The elemental entities moved with unnatural rigidity, their normally fluid forms constrained by what appeared to be binding spells emanating from crystals similar to the one atop Aurelius's staff. "They're enslaving the elemental sovereigns," Marioleona growled, flames intensifying around her in response to her anger. "Using their connection to dimensional energies to power something." Yoruichi's keen eyes identified the central apparatus taking shape around the nexus, a massive ritual circle inscribed with symbols that resonated on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "That's not standard magical construction," she noted. "Those sigils operate on principles beyond this dimension's natural system." Vortis's influence, Vados confirmed. "He's guiding Aurelius to create a dimensional amplifier using the nexus as a foundation. If activated, it would create not just a breach but a catastrophic collapse of all dimensional boundaries connected to this magical system." Ghislaine studied the defenses with tactical precision, identifying patrol patterns and potential weaknesses. "Direct assault would be detected long before we reached the central structure. We need a more subtle approach. Or a diversion," Yoruichi suggested, her background in stealth operations shaping her thinking. "Something to draw attention away from a smaller infiltration team." As they discussed tactical options, Naruto's divine senses detected a subtle disturbance in the magical energies flowing toward the nexus. One of the ley lines was fluctuating erratically, its power diverted by something underground. "There's another factor at play here," he noted, pointing toward the anomalous energy flow. "Someone else is interfering with the ritual preparation." The elemental sovereign's fiery form pulsed with recognition. The resistance, mages who opposed Aurelius's increasingly extreme methods. They've been waging a guerrilla campaign against his elemental conclave for months. This new information opened additional strategic possibilities. "If we coordinated with these resistance fighters," Naruto suggested, "we could create multiple simultaneous pressure points rather than a single assault vector." "I can locate them," the sovereign offered. "My elemental nature allows me to follow the magical disturbance to its source without being detected by Aurelius's monitoring spells." "Do it," Naruto decided, "but return quickly. We need to act before the dimensional amplifier reaches activation threshold." As the elemental being departed, flowing like liquid fire along the contours of the landscape, the group continued refining their approach. Marioleona, drawing on her intimate knowledge of fire magic principles, identified critical components in the ritual configuration. "Those primary anchor crystals," she indicated, pointing to 5 massive gemstones positioned at key points around the nexus, "they're stabilizing the entire construct. Disrupt those, and the ritual framework would require complete recalibration." "Which buys us time but doesn't solve the underlying problem," Yoruichi noted. "We need to neutralize Aurelius himself to truly stop this process." Ghislaine's practical mind had already moved to implementation. "Vermilion and I can target the anchor crystals. Her flames and my sword techniques should be sufficient to destroy them before significant resistance can mobilize. While Yoruichi and I locate and confront Aurelius," Naruto continued, seeing where her tactical thinking led. "Her stealth abilities combined with my divine sensing should allow us to pinpoint his exact location within the complex. And I will establish a dimensional stabilization field around the nexus itself," Vados concluded. "This will prevent any premature breaches from forming during the confrontation." With roles established, they waited only for the sovereign's return to begin their coordinated assault. The fiery entity reappeared minutes later, its form moving with urgent purpose as it rejoined them. "The resistance operates from a network of caverns beneath the eastern quadrant of the ritual site," it reported. "Their leader has agreed to provide a diversion at our signal. They've been planning their own assault but lacked the power to directly confront Aurelius." "Perfect timing," Naruto acknowledged. "We'll coordinate our approach with their diversion. Have them focus on the western perimeter. That will draw the most attention away from the anchor crystals while keeping their forces relatively safe from the main concentration of Aurelius's power." With preparations complete, the group moved into position, using natural features of the landscape to approach their designated targets without premature detection. Vados remained at a higher elevation, her staff beginning the complex patterns required to establish a dimensional stabilization field, while the others proceeded toward the nexus from different directions. Naruto and Yoruichi utilized her exceptional stealth capabilities to infiltrate the central complex, moving like shadows between patrol routes. Meanwhile, Ghislaine and Mereoleona position themselves within striking distance of the primary anchor crystals, awaiting the signal to begin their assault. The agreed-upon signal came in the form of a massive explosion at the western pyramid. Of the ritual site, the resistance launching their diversion with impressive magical firepower. As guards and mages rushed to counter this apparent main assault, Ghislaine and Mereoleona launched their own attack on the now less defended anchor crystals. Mereoleona moved with ferocious efficiency, her flames manifesting in forms far more precise than her usual overwhelming assault style. Flame magic. Calidus Brachium Purgatory. She intoned, channeling concentrated fire into a spear-like projection that pierced the first anchor crystal with surgical precision. Simultaneously, Ghislaine executed a perfect North God-style technique that shattered another crystal with a single strike so fast it was nearly invisible to normal perception. North God-style. Dimensional severance, she named the technique. Her massive sword vibrating at a frequency that disrupted the crystal's magical lattice structure. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The ritual framework surrounding the nexus destabilized. Magical energies fluctuating wildly as the carefully calibrated system lost its primary stabilization points. Alarms magical and mundane sounded throughout the complex as Aurelius's forces realized they were under a coordinated attack from multiple vectors. Inside the central structure, Naruto and Yoruichi used the confusion to penetrate deeper, following Naruto's divine senses toward the source of the dimensional manipulation. They found Aurelius in a chamber directly above the nexus itself, a towering figure with features strikingly similar to Mereoleona's, wielding a staff crackling with elemental energies. Intruders, he noted without surprise, turning to face them with eyes that glowed with internal magical fire. Vados warned me you would come, Ryujin. Though this human shell you wear is unexpected. Naruto stepped forward, allowing more of his divine consciousness to surface as he addressed the ancient mage. Aurelius Vermilion, you're being manipulated. The Convergence Vortis promises won't grant you mastery over elemental magic, it will destroy the very system you seek to perfect. The Archmage smiled coldly, magical energy pulsing around him in multicolored auras. Such limited understanding from one who once shaped reality itself. The convergence doesn't destroy, it unifies, removes artificial boundaries between magical systems that should never have been separated. That separation exists for a reason, Naruto countered, divine ki beginning to manifest around his hands as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Different magical systems operate on fundamentally incompatible principles. Forcing them together would create catastrophic instability. Yoruichi had positioned herself strategically during this exchange, her golden eyes analyzing Aurelius's magical defenses with professional assessment. His staff is the key, she murmured to Naruto through their tactical link. It's channeling multiple elemental affinities simultaneously, something that should be impossible according to this dimension's natural laws. Another of Vortis's modifications, Naruto agreed softly. If we can separate him from the staff, his connectio end to the dimensional energies would be severed. Aurelius laughed, having overheard their whispered exchange. You think I rely solely on my focus implement? I am Aurelius the Elemental Archon, first of the Vermilion line. Master of the primordial flame. My body itself has been remade as a conduit for magical forces you can barely comprehend. To demonstrate his claim, he slammed his staff against the chamber floor, releasing a shockwave of magical energy that forced Naruto and Yoruichi to dodge in opposite directions. The attack wasn't aimed to kill but to separate them, a tactical decisio. And that revealed Aurelius's combat intelligence alongside his magical prowess. Outside, Mereoleona and Ghislaine faced growing resistance as Aurelius's forces recovered from their initial surprise. Ite mages wielding specialized elemental magic converged on their position, forcing them to shift from offensive destruction of the remaining anchor crystals to defensive combat. These aren't ordinary magic users, Mereoleona called to Ghislaine as she countered a barrage of water magic with her flames. They're channeling elemental energy without the grimoires or formal structures of my era's magic system. Ghislaine nodded in understanding, her sword deflecting an earth magic assault that would have crushed lesser warriors. Raw power over refined technique, quantity over quality. Maintain your precision advantage. The Sword King's tactical assessment proved accurate. While their opponents wielded tremendous raw magical power, their techniques lacked the efficiency and precision that characterized Mereoleona and Ghislaine's more evolved combat styles. By focusing on economy of movement and targeted strikes rather than matching power directly, they maintained their position despite being significantly outnumbered. In the central chamber, Naruto engaged Aurelius directly, Divine Ki enhancing his natural abilities as he tested the ancient mage's defenses. Each attack was calculated not to overwhelm but to analyze, identifying patterns and limitations in Aurelius's seemingly vast magical repertoire. "You fight with unusual restraint for a god," Aurelius observed, countering Naruto's probing attacks with elemental barriers that shifted between fire, water, earth, and air. "The human vessel has weakened you more than Vados anticipated. Or perhaps I understand something you've forgotten," Naruto replied, launching a precisely calibrated Rasengan that disrupted Aurelius's magical rhythm without causing lethal damage. True mastery isn't about overwhelming force but perfect control. While Naruto kept Aurelius's attention focused forward, Yoruichi executed a flanking maneuver that showcased why she had once led Soul Society's stealth forces. Moving faster than normal perception could track, she appeared momentarily behind the Archmage, her hands targeting specific magical pressure points with techniques designed to disrupt spiritual energy flow. "Hakuda. Flow disruption strike," she intoned, fingers jabbing with precision at Aurelius's magical network. The ancient mage reacted with unexpected speed, his body dissolving into elemental energy that reformed several feet away. "Interesting," he acknowledged, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Your techniques target magical circulation rather than the magic itself. From which realm do you hail, assassin?" "One where balance matters more than power," Yoruichi replied cryptically, already repositioning for another approach. Throughout this exchange, Naruto had been gathering environmental data, his div.in senses analyzing the complex magical constructs surrounding them. The chamber itself, he realized, was more than just a control room, it was the focal point of the entire dimensional amplifier, with Aurelius himself serving as the central conduit. "Vados," he communicated through their established link, "the amplifier design has been modified. Aurelius isn't just channeling the energy, he's incorporated himself as the primary conversion mechanism. That changes our approach significantly," came the angel's measured response. "Separating him from the staff won't be sufficient. His entire magical system has been reconfigured to serve as a dimensional catalyst." Outside, the stabilization field Vados had established began showing signs of strain as the ritual site's inherent magical RGIES responded to Aurelius's manipulation. The Nexus crystal pulsed with increasing intensity, drawing power from the ley lines despite the destruction of several anchor points. Mereoleona, sensing the shift in magical currents, realized the situation was deteriorating faster than anticipated. "The diversion won't hold much longer," she called to Ghislaine. "We need to reach the central chamber and assist Naruto directly." The Sword King nodded in agreement, her blade cleaving through another defensive line as they fought their way toward the Nexus structure. "The resistance fighters are becoming overwhelmed on the western perimeter. Our window is closing rapidly." Inside the central chamber, Aurelius had begun a complex incantation, magical symbols appearing in the air around him as he channeled power through his staff into the Nexus below. The dimensional energies responded immediately, reality itself beginning to thin as the boundary between dimensions weakened. "Witness the dawn of a new magical era," the Archmage proclaimed, his voice resonating with power drawn from multiple elemental sources simultaneously. "When the convergence completes, I will become the Nexus through which all magical systems flow, the living embodiment of unified elemental power." Naruto recognized the dangerous threshold they were approaching, if the breach began forming with Aurelius serving as its anchor point. Separating the mage from the process would become exponentially more difficult. "Yoruichi," he called, Divine Ki gathering around his hands as he prepared a more decisive approach. "We need to disrupt his magical circulation completely, not just temporarily." The former captain understood immediately, golden eyes narrowing as she assessed potential vectors. "I'll need direct contact with his central magical pathway, the equivalent of a spiritual heart." Can you create an opening? Naruto nodded, his hands forming seals in a sequence that combined shinobi techniques with divine energy manipulation. Divine Sage Art. Boundary Disruption Field. Golden energy erupted from his palms, expanding outward in a spherical pattern that interfered with the ambient magical energies Aurelius was channeling. Unlike a direct attack on the mage himself, this technique targeted the environmental conditions necessary for his ritual, creating a localized area where magical flow became erratic and difficult to control. Aurelius's expression shifted from confident triumph to concerned concentration as his carefully calibrated spell began fluctuating unpredictably. Clever, he acknowledged, adjusting his staff position to compensate. But ultimately futile. The process has progressed too far to be halted by simple interference. What the ancient mage failed to realize was Naruto's technique wasn't meant to stop the ritual directly, it was creating the opening Yoruichi needed. As Aurelius focused on maintaining his spell against the disruptive field, the former captain executed her attack with perfect timing. Shunko. Raijin Senkai, she intoned, her body erupting with spiritual pressure combined with Kido energy that focused into her striking hands. Moving faster than even Aurelius's enhanced perception could track, she penetrated his defensive perimeter and struck directly at the center of his magical circulation system. The impact was catastrophic for the Archmage's carefully constructed magical network. Yoruichi's technique, designed specifically to disrupt spiritual energy flow in Soul Society, translated perfectly to the magical circulation of this dimension. Aurelius's connection to the elemental energies he had been channeling severed abruptly, causing feedback that rippled through his entire system. Impossible, he gasped, staggering backward. Road as multicolored energy erupted from his body in uncontrolled bursts. No human technique should be able to disrupt primordial magical binding. She's not just any human, Naruto replied, moving forward to press their advantage. And neither am I. With Aurelius temporarily disconnected from his power source, Naruto seized the opportunity to address the dimensional amplifier directly. Channeling divine ki through his hands, he placed his palms against the chamber floor, sending his energy into the nexus crystal below. Divine restoration. Boundary reinforcement, he intoned, golden energy. Y flowing from his body into the dimensional fabric itself, countering the weakening Aurelius had initiated. The effect was immediate, reality stabilizing as the divine energy reinforced natural bound areas that had been artificially weakened. The nexus crystal's pulsing slowed, returning to its natural rhythm as the forced amplification ceased. Aurelius wasn't defeated, however. Despite the disruption to his magical system, the ancient mage possessed reserves of power accumulated over decades of elemental mastery. With a roar of defiance, he slammed his staff against the floor, sending a shock wave of pure magical force outward that forced Naruto and Yoruichi to abandon their advantageous positions. You may delay the convergence, he snarled, elemental energy once again gathering around him in swirling patterns. But you cannot prevent what has already begun. Vados has initiated the process in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Stop one and others will continue. Before either could respond to this ominous declaration, the chamber doors burst open as Marioliona and Ghislaine finally fought their way through to the central structure. The fire captain's eyes widened momentarily as she beheld Aurelius, the legendary ancestor whose techniques had formed the foundation of her family's magical legacy. So the bloodline continues, Aurelius noted, studying Marioliona with immediate recognition. I sense the vermilion flame within you, descendant, purer and more focused than any I have trained personally. Marioliona's response was characteristically direct. Your legacy deserved better than this, Aurelius. The vermilion line was meant to protect magical balance, not destroy it. Something flickered in the ancient mage's eyes, a moment of uncertainty that suggested Vados' influence might not have completely overridden his original principles. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by renewed determination. You cannot understand the greater purpose, he declared, raising his staff as elemental energy condensed around its crystalline head. The artificial separation of magical systems has constrained our potential for millennia. The convergence will release limitations you've never even recognized as chains. At the cost of reality itself, Naruto countered, positioning himself protectively before his companions as Aurelius's power built toward another attack. The dimensional boundaries exist because different magical systems operate on fundamentally incompatible principles. Forcing them together doesn't create harmony, it creates annihilation. For a brief moment, doubt seemed to cloud Aurelius's expression. Vados assured me the process would stabilize once the initial turbulence settled, that a new, unified magical system would emerge from the convergence. Vados lied. Naruto stated simply, he seeks not unification but chaos, the complete dissolution of boundaries that maintain multiversal integrity. Before Aurelius could respond, a new voice entered their consciousness, not spoken aloud but projected directly into their minds with overwhelming force. Enough hesitation, vessel, complete the convergence as promised. The voice carried the unmistakable resonance of Vados, his influence suddenly manifesting through the dimensional thinning Aurelius had already accomplished. The ancient mage's body stiffened as purple energy, same corruption they had witnessed in previous dimensions, began flowing through his magical network, overriding his momentary doubt. Vados is taking direct control, Vados warned through their tactical link. The dimensional barriers have thinned enough to allow his consciousness partial entry into this realm. Aurelius's movements became jerky and unnatural as Vordis's influence fought against his remaining autonomy. His eyes, previously burning with natural magical fire, now glowed with purple light that spoke of dimensional corruption. The convergence must complete, he ground out, his voice distorting as Vordis's power surged through him. All magical systems will become one. Naruto recognized that reasoning would no longer reach the ancient mage. Vordis's corruption had progressed too far. They needed to sever the connection forcibly before Aurelius lost himself completely. Marioliona, he called, divine ki gathering around his hands as he prepared a more decisive technique. You share his bloodline, your flames might be able to purge the corruption without destroying him completely. The fire captain understood immediately, her magical intuition grasping what Naruto proposed. Crimson flames erupted around her hands, but unlike her usual combat manifestations, these burned with a purifying intensity rather than destructive force. Flame magic. Ancestral purification, she intoned, channeling her mana through familial connections that transcended normal magical principles. The flames shot forward, enveloping Aurelius in a cocoon of purifying fire that attacked Vordis's corruption rather than the mage himself. Aurelius screamed, a sound of both agony and release as the purifying flames fought against the dimensional corruption infiltrating his magical system. Purple energy boiled away from his body in noxious clouds, revealing the natural magical aura beneath that had been suppressed by Vordis's influence. Taking advantage of this momentary vulnerability, Ghislaine moved with the perfect economy of motion that characterized the North God style, her sword striking not at Aurelius himself but at the staff he wielded. North God style. Conceptual severance. She named her technique, the blade passing through the staff at precisely the point where Vordis's modifications connected to the original magical implement. The staff split cleanly, its corrupted crystal head separating from the shaft with a discharge of magical energy that momentarily blinded everyone in the chamber. When vision returned, Aurelius stood swaying, his connection to Vordis's influence severed but his body dangerously depleted from the magical backlash. What have I done? He whispered, clarity returning to his eyes as the corruption receded. The elemental sovereigns, the Nexus. I nearly destroyed everything I swore to protect. Marioliona approached her ancestor cautiously, flames still flickering around her hands should Vordis's influence resurge. You were manipulated by an entity beyond your understanding. The question now is whether you'll help us repair the damage before it's too late. Aurelius studied his descendant with weary recognition. The vermilion fire burns strongly in you, purer than I've achieved despite centuries of refinement. With visible effort, he straightened, magical dignity reasserting itself despite his weakened state. What must be done? The Nexus has been partially corrupted, Naruto explained, divine senses monitoring the dimensional energies still fluctuating beneath them. It needs to be recalibrated to its original frequency to restore proper boundaries. And the elemental sovereigns must be freed from the binding crystals, Vados added, having joined them in the central chamber once her stabilization field was no longer needed. Their natural connection to dimensional energies will help accelerate the healing process. Aurelius nodded grimly, accepting both his responsibility and the path to redemption. The release spell is complex, designed specifically to prevent tampering. But as the one who created the bindings, I can unravel them more efficiently than anyone else. Then that's your task, Naruto decided. Mereoleona will accompany you to ensure Vados doesn't attempt to reassert control. Yoruichi, Ghislaine, and I will recalibrate the Nexus itself. As they separated to accomplish their respective tasks, the elemental sovereign who had originally guided them reappeared, its fiery form dim but persistent. The resistance has secured the outer perimeter, it reported. Aurelius's forces are either retreating or surrendering as the binding spells weaken. Good, Naruto acknowledged. Once the sovereigns are freed, gather them at equidistant points around the Nexus. We'll need their elemental alignments to properly balance the recalibration. Working with coordinated efficiency, the group implemented their recovery plan. Aurelius, supported both physically and magically by Mereoleona, began the complex process of releasing the elemental sovereigns from their bindings. As each ancient being regained its freedom, it joined the growing circle around the Nexus, contributing its natural elemental affinity to the rebalancing effort. Meanwhile, Naruto, Yoruichi, and Ghislaine descended to the Nexus chamber itself, a massive crystalline structure pulsing with the lifeblood of this world's magical system. The corruption was immediately apparent, veins of purple energy running through the otherwise perfect crystal, distorting the natural flow of magical power. The corruption hasn't reached the core, Yoruichi observed, her spiritual sensitivity allowing her to perceive layers of energy invisible to normal senses. It's still primarily affecting the surface matrices. Ghislaine studied the crystalline structure with tactical assessment. Physical methods won't be effective against energy corruption. We need something that operates on the same fundamental level. Naruto nodded in agreement, his divine consciousness expanding to interface directly with the Nexus's energy patterns. I can establish a purification field using divine ki, but I'll need both of you to help stabilize the process. The Nexus will resist any external influence, even beneficial ones, as a self-defense mechanism. Understanding their roles, Yoruichi and Ghislaine positio themselves at key points around the crystal, using their respective energies, spiritual pressure and mana, to create a triangulated field that would contain and direct Naruto's divine influence. Ready when you are, Yoruichi confirmed. Golden eyes focused with intense concentration. Begin, Ghislaine added simply, her massive sword planted before her as a focal point for her mana projection. Naruto placed his palms directly against the Nexus crystal, allowing his divine consciousness to penetrate beyond physical barriers into the energetic matrix itself. What he found was both beautiful and disturbing, a perfectly balanced system of magical circulation that had been artificially distorted to serve Vados' purposes. Divine restoration, conceptual purification, he intoned, golden energy flowing from his hands into the crystal in carefully modulated waves. Unlike brute force approaches that might have shattered the delicate magical ecosystem, Naruto's technique operated on the fundamental principles underlying the corruption itself. The divine ki sought out dimensional distortions, neutralizing them not by opposition but by restoration, returning each affected area to its original, natural state. Outside the Nexus chamber, Aurelius had successfully freed the final elemental sovereigns, the ancient beings forming a complete circle around the central structure. Guided by Mereoleona and Vados, they began channeling their elemental energies in synchronized patterns that reinforced Naruto's purification efforts from the exterior. The process was delicate and time-consuming, requiring perfect coordination between multiple types of energy that would normally conflict rather than cooperate. But under Naruto's guidance, his divine consciousness bridging the conceptual gaps between different systems, they gradually established harmony where corruption had reigned. After what seemed like hours but might have been minutes in the time-distorted environment of the Nexus, the final traces of purple energy dissipated, replaced by the natural golden-white glow of properly flowing magical power. The Nexus crystal pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady rhythm that resonated with the ley lines connecting it to the broader magical network of the entire dimension. It's done, Naruto announced, withdrawing his hands from the crystal as the purification completed. The Nexus has been restored to its original configuration. Aurelius, who had joined them for the final phase of the restoration, studied the crystal with both professional assessment and personal regret. The damage I nearly caused. It would have destroyed not just our current magical system but the possibility of all future development. Vados is particularly skilled at manipulating those. With the power to effect significant change, Vados observed, no condemnation in her tone. He identifies desires so fundamental to a being's nature that they overwhelm rational caution. The ancient mage turned to Mereoleona, studying his descendant with new appreciation. The vermilion line continues strongly through you. Your flames carry a purity I spent centuries attempting to achieve. Because I never sought power for its own sake, Mereoleona replied, her usual brusqueness tempered by the unique circumstance of addressing her legendary ancestor. Fire magic isn't about dominance but about transformation, breaking down the unnecessary to reveal what truly matters. Something like pride flickered in Aurelius's eyes, a wisdom I had forgotten in my pursuit of greater magical understanding. He straightened, decision evident in his posture. I cannot undo the damage my ambition has caused, but I can ensure the Nexus remains protected against future manipulation. What do you propose? Naruto asked, sensing the significance of the moment. A binding oath, Aurelius explained, sealed with blood magic that predates even the elemental conclave. I will become the Nexus Guardian. My magical essence permanently bonded to its matrix is a living defense system. Mereoleona's eyes widened slightly. That's why your name fades from our historical records after the first convergence. Not because you died, but because you became something else entirely. Aurelius nodded. History remembers results more than intentions. Perhaps it's fitting that my legacy continues through descendants who understood what I forgot, that magic exists to serve life, not to dominate it. With solemn ceremony, the ancient mage began the binding ritual, his magical essence gradually merging with the Nexus crystal in a process that would eventually transform him from individual practitioner to fundamental aspect of the magical system itself. As his physical form became increasingly translucent, he offered a final observation to Naruto. Ryujin walks between worlds again, though in changed form. The boundaries between God and mortals seem less absolute than we once believed. His gaze shifted to include the entire group. Perhaps that's the true balance. Not separation between different types of being, but the recognition that all existence shares fundamental connection despite apparent differences. With those words, Aurelius completed his transformation, his individual consciousness diffusing into the Nexus itself. The crystal pulsed once with blinding intensity, then settled into a steady glow that seemed somehow more vital and responsive than before. He's become one with the magical system, Vados explained softly. Not lost, but transformed, his awareness spread through the entire network rather than confined to a single perspective. Mereoleona stared at the Nexus for several long moments, complex emotions playing across her normally fierce features. All our family histories portray him as the perfect archmage, the standard against which all vermilions measure themselves. None mention his mistakes or his redemption. History simplifies, Naruto observed quietly. People need symbols more than they need complicated truths. But you've seen both aspects of your ancestor, his greatness and his fallibility. That's a rare gift. The fire captain nodded slowly, flames dancing briefly around her clenched fists as she processed this new understanding of her magical heritage. It changes how I view my own path. The pursuit of magical supremacy has always driven the Vermilion line, but Aurelius ultimately found meaning in service rather than dominance. As they prepared to depart, the elemental sovereigns gathered to bid them farewell, their various elemental forms creating a spectacular display of magical harmony. The fiery sovereign who had first guided them approached Naruto directly, its form condensing slightly as it communicated. The dimensional boundaries have been restored and reinforced, it confirmed. This realm should remain resistant to Vortis's influence for generations to come. But not indefinitely, Naruto noted, divine awareness perceiving limitations even in their successful restoration. The fundamental pattern of convergence continues to develop across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Which means our work here, while vital, is merely one battle in a larger campaign, Ghislaine summarized, practical as always. Where does Vortis strike next? Vados consulted her staff, its glow reflecting complex diamonds. Ional currents invisible to normal perception. The pattern suggests he's targeting dimensions with unique energy manifestations, each one adding a specific frequency to his convergence harmonics. Ease building a multidimensional resonance pattern, Yoruichi deduced, her analytical mind grasping the strategy. Each breach contributes a specific energetic tone to the larger convergence symphony. Naruto nodded grimly, which means stopping individual breaches won't be sufficient long-term. We need to identify and neutralize his central orchestration point, the dimensional nexus where he directly interfaces with the multiverse, Vados agreed. But locating it will require tracking subtle resonance patterns across multiple reality clusters, a process requiring both time and specialized perception. As they debated next steps, Marioliona rejoined them, her brief communion with the transformed Aurelius complete. Her expression held new resolve, the experience having clearly affected her on a fundamental level. Aurelius provided one final insight before his individual consciousness fully merged with the Nexus, she reported. Vados mentioned a celestial archive during their communications, a repository of knowledge from the original unified reality that survived the dimensional separation. Vados's ancient eyes widened slightly, a rare display of surprise from the normally composed angel. The archive was thought lost during the first convergence. If Vados has located it, he would have access to fundamental dimensional constants that could accelerate his convergence efforts exponentially. Naruto completed the thought, divine memories providing context his human experience lacked. We need to find this archive before he can fully utilize its contents. Elias believes it's located in a dimension where reality itself is malleable, a realm existing between the boundaries of stable worlds where thought directly influences environmental conditions, Marioliona continued. He called it the dreaming realm. Yoruichi's golden eyes narrowed thoughtfully. That description reminds me of what Soul Reapers call the Valley of Screams, pocket dimensions that form in the spaces between established realities. Similar concept, different manifestation, Vados clarified. The dreaming realm exists as a buffer zone between major dimensional clusters, a place where reality itself remains partially unformed, responsive to conscious will rather than fixed physical laws. Then that's our next destination, Naruto decided. If the Celestial Archive contains knowledge that could accelerate Vados's plans, securing it takes priority over addressing individual breaches. With their new objective established, the group bid farewell to the elemental sovereigns, leaving the restored nexus under their eternal guardianship. As Vados prepared the transportation sphere for their interdimensional journey, Naruto noticed Marioliona standing slightly apart, her gaze distant as she processed everything she had learned about her ancestral legacy. Having second thoughts, he asked quietly, joining her at the edge of their gathering. The fire captain shook her head, flames briefly dancing around her in unconscious expression of her emotional state. No, but my perspective has evolved. I've always defined strength in terms of overwhelming force, being the most powerful fighter in any confrontation. And now, Naruto prompted when she paused. Aurelius possessed greater raw magical power than anyone in recorded history, she continued thoughtfully. Yet his true legacy comes not from that power itself but from how he ultimately chose to use it. There's wisdom in that I hadn't considered before. Before Naruto could respond, Vados announced that the transportation sphere was ready. As the glowing bubble expanded to encompass their group, reality began dissolving around them, preparing for the journey to the mysterious dreaming realm where thought and matter existed in fluid interchange. The elemental sovereigns gathered in formation, their combined energies creating a spectacular farewell display as the interdimensional travelers departed. The last thing Naruto saw before their vision of this world faded completely was the Nexus crystal pulsing with renewed vitality, Aurelius's final gift to the magical system he had nearly destroyed in his misguided pursuit of power. As they traveled between dimensions, Naruto reflected on the pattern emerging across their various encounters. In each world, Vados targeted individuals with exceptional abilities and profound desire, leveraging their greatest strengths while exploiting their deepest vulnerabilities. Understanding this strategy would be crucial in anticipating his next moves, particularly in a realm where reality itself responded directly to conscious will. The dreaming realm awaited, a place where thought became reality, where the boundaries between imagination and existence blurred beyond normal distinction. If the Celestial Archive truly resided there, securing it would require not just physical prowess or magical power, but a profound understanding of the nature of F. Reality itself. A challenge uniquely suited to the evolving partnership between Naruto's human perspective and Ryujin's divine awareness. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.